Last 20 years, there have been many gaming titles that have managed to cultivate their own avid fan bases. Whether it be because of the story, gameplay, music, or any number of reasons, there are many titles out there that fans love which are not widely known to the larger public. It's a rare occasion when a sequel to one of these games not only manages to break through into the mainstream market, but at the same time, while doing so, manages to be considered in the eyes of many
Automata so
a
fucking
masterpiece.
It is a masterpiece. Absolutely, it's a fucking masterpiece. I had a friend who was asking me, hey, should I play Automata or these other games? Automata. I just immediately just fucking play Automata. Play it. It's a fucking masterpiece. I don't know how many games I can call a masterpiece besides Automata.
Nier Automata introduced many players to the world of Nier. Its story, themes, music, gameplay, and design was so uniquely and masterfully executed, it was, and still is, unlike many other games you'll experience in a long time. It left many new fans eager to learn more about this franchise's history. But imagine the shock they find themselves in when they discover Nier's story not only stems from, but continues on, from a completely different franchise altogether. Drakengard is a title most gamers are not familiar with. It was originally released on the PlayStation 2 back in 2003 to mixed reviews. While the gameplay was hit or miss, there was undeniably a unique approach when it came to the characters inhabiting its world. Yoko Taro, the game's director, had an interesting way of looking at modern tropes. Typically, the protagonist of a game might slaughter hundreds and thousands of people yet be hailed as a hero. He found concepts like that wild. How was someone like that not insane? So it was the perfect choice to put into his own game. He implemented the ideas many wouldn't dare or even think of to touch.
He has a 2B little figure right there.
The willingness to
you saw the 2B figurine? This man.
Which gave his titles their own unique identity. He stepped away for the sequel in 2005, but when it was finished, returned to work on a third installment. During its development, however, the concept wound up straying a little too far from what they intended, and so the game was instead rebranded to what we now know as Nier. But interestingly enough, despite the rebrand, Yoko Taro never stopped treating Nier as though it was a sequel to his past game. As far as he was concerned, he picked up right where he left off. And once more, he continued to implement a unique view on the world.
It looks so different, dude.
Drakengard would eventually get an official third installment in 2014, and it would be a prequel to the original game. But
it was a PS3 game?
Have gone by, instead of furthering the divide between the franchises, he's actively worked to bring them closer to the point where it's an undeniable fact
this man's just staring at 2B's booty.
Unfortunately, understanding the timeline
does he actually wear the mask at work all the time?
The games. Each game has a plethora of different endings which can and do branch into their own separate timelines. Add on top of that countless different novellas, books, manga, stage plays, and whatever other form of medium Yoko Taro has chosen to dip his toe into, and you have a lot of material to get through. But getting the true timeline is work in and of itself, since Yoko Taro loves to just change things. Considering this timeline is one that theoretically deals with an infinite number of varying branches, Yoko Taro loves to change the events of history anytime a new version of a story comes out. If you're currently watching the Automata anime,
we need to watch that. That's right. We can watch it finally. Oh my god.
That certain characters have completely changed. And that's on purpose. He's not retconning his story, he's just going down a different path of the timeline. His unique approach to storytelling
oh my god, are you serious? Bro, what the fuck is he staring at?
He's only gotten more bold with the risks he's willing to take. From swapping genres mid-game to tackling the topics others dare not approach, it's almost as if the whole world is Yoko Taro's playground and he's doing what he wants. This video is going to be as straightforward of a timeline as could possibly be. I'm not going to explore any of the irrelevant endings.
He wears that all the time at work.
Lead into different paths.
Really? Nobody knows what he looks like. He literally always wears that at random places.
Straight to its end.
What
As
the
such,
fuck?
any material that's not part of the main timeline
This guy
will
is like
be
a
left
fucking
out. These
Mandalorian in
include
real
the
life. He does not take off his
endings, a manga
helmet.
series, as well as Drakengard 2, since Yoko Taro didn't work on it, and he ignores it as well.
He
With
ignores
that said,
Drakengard
I
2,
present
that's
to
great.
you the complete, unabridged timeline.
So Drakengard 2
Nier.
basically gets thrown out because it wasn't his work. Drakengard 3.
While the Drakengard universe is what begins this whole timeline and is set in a fantastical world full of magic and dragons, its history actually stems from our very own, literally. Up until the year 856, their world was exactly like ours. The same countries, the same continents, the same past, everything was the same. But in the year 856, earthquakes began devastating parts of the world. The most important was one that occurred in the Iberian Peninsula in Europe. After this, overnight, seemingly out of thin air, a mysterious metropolis had risen, and with it brought all sorts of powerful creatures not native to the world, such as dragons. This location would be known as Cathedral City. Now, to be clear, there is a lot of mystery surrounding where, why, and how Cathedral City wound up appearing out of nowhere. And with the scarce amount of information available, assumptions have to be made. The most logical sense seems to be that it came from both a different time period and dimension. I say this because if you're familiar with the franchise, there is a character named Accord. She's an android meant to observe singularities across the timelines. Singularities in and of themselves are just entities that create a branch within a timeline in which things change from what was supposed to happen. Her job is to monitor these timelines and ensure these—
Bro, that's something out of fucking what's that show Loki was in, where the show Loki, that organization he works for in the show, you remember what it's called? The one that manages time and like different singularities, or what, like it manages time and it makes sure that things like don't split or some shit like that.
Singularities don't lead to the downfall of every single timeline, thus annihilating everything.
Timekeepers, yeah.
That is her purpose.
Branches of strange merits, very careful. Time variance authority, yeah. Yeah, the time variance authorities, yeah. TVA. You gotta watch it. The Loki show was really good. Even if you didn't really watch any other Marvel, the Loki show was a good show.
I bring her up is because—
Bro, she's an android and she existed in Drakengard?
As a security measure, keeping a very dangerous entity, which I'll explain here soon, locked away. Cathedral City appears inside the Drakengard universe in the year 856.
Wait, how is she an android then?
Accord wasn't invented until the year 6230 in the Nier universe.
Wait, this guy, hold on. This is gonna take, I don't know if dude, hold on. There's an android from the year 6000 that travels through time and space to go back and prevent singularities, or like not get the timeline not fucked up. And it goes all the way back to fucking Drakengard. What?
Her, alongside dragons, were both invented to help fight back against the alien invasion.
I missed the notification. Oh, dude, it's okay, bro. I got the last ending. It was beautiful. Your girl saved child Nier. Yeah, and now we're going over the lore. Darren gave me a pretty cool lore video. And this, I'm tripping out about this Accord android lady. How an android from the year 6000 comes back in something with the Cathedral Drakengard? What?
I know that part sounds really weird and random and out of nowhere, but if you know the timeline, then you know that is an event that does happen, and we will.
The more of us create, the more of our original memories we're getting.
Accord was invented for the first time in the year 6230.
Thank you for playing.
Cathedral City, from its architecture,
does she only show up for like a minute at the end, or
very advanced? So
Accord, yeah, I know she can time travel, but I don't know much about her. Well, apparently she's an android that was made in the year 6000 in the Nier universe. Wait, hold on. What year is the Nier Automata universe in? Do we remember this? She's from the year 6200.
Never directly stated, it makes sense that some sort of time-space phenomenon
Near universe is
pulled
between
Cathedral
6,000
City
and
from the
8,000.
6th
11,400.
millennium to the Drakengard universe in the year 856.
What
It
the
is
fuck?
possible that everything exists in a type of
Yeah,
cycle.
so
Nier's
it's within
timeline
the
only
Nier
happens
timeline.
because of the events of Drakengard.
It's a loop.
And if Drakengard only happens because of Nier, then it's one big cycle.
You know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the Loki show, with the Time Variance Authority. She's referred to by the weapons dealer in the Resistance camp, but it's like a reference. That's all. But they acknowledge her existence, right? So, you know what it? You know what it seems like, dude. You know what I feel like Yoko Taro really wants to kind of do. He kind of wants to make his own like kind of Marvel universe in a way, but without. Because when you start getting universes that have like time skips, multiple dimensions, and different branching timelines like this,
Cycle with no clear beginning. But anyway, all of that was to say Cathedral City, dragons, and other beings all showed up out of nowhere, resulting in the true start to the Drakengard timeline.
yeah. But in his universe, he will
But to
repeatedly
better
suffer and
understand
die.
what is to
It's more
unfold, we must
sadistic.
first talk about the true antagonist of everything that is to come, from here to the end of the timeline, God. God is an entity that is never seen throughout any of the games, novellas, side content, and so on. They have no religious affiliation, it is just God in the premise of being the creator of all living things. The plot comes in when God deems mankind a failure due to their strong egos and uncontrollable nature, free will as it is.
It's all God's. God's like, nope. You know what? Yo, these humans? Nah. Fuck them.
As such, God has sentenced humanity to death and created creatures to wipe them out. These are where the Watchers came from.
The Watchers?
Otherworldly beings meant to assist in the destruction of humanity. They have no set form and can take on the appearance of many different things. But it is typically their primary goal to simply
What the fuck are these giant babies?
It is possible that this is also where the Black Flower came from. Possibly the most dangerous active threat to all life. In the simplest of terms, the Black Flower has the ability to destroy everything. It's not only a threat to the world, but the universe and the timelines as a whole. Returning to the idea of Cathedral City having come from the future, the Black Flower was likely both discovered and subsequently sealed away during that time as well. It currently resides locked away within Cathedral City.
Yeah.
Accord, whose job it is to make sure the timelines don't end.
Is Accord shown up in Drakengard 3 or something? It's interesting. And she got like multiple ones. You know what she reminds me of too? Wow, I feel like Yoko Taro gets some really interesting inspirations. I mean, it's a lot of Marvel stuff, but or like comic books. Like for sure, Yoko Taro has to be into comic books. There's no fucking way he's getting the inspiration about these sort of things without comic books. Yeah, I'm very much not familiar with Drakengard 1 and 3. This character kind of reminds me a little bit of I don't know if you guys seen the Umbrella Academy, right? It was a show on Netflix. They have an agency that deals with this sort of things too, dealing with like the timelines as well. It's an interesting idea.
And even an android guardian named Bardus is located within the walls to protect it. He is of immense strength, as we will come to see. Where the Black Flower originated is entirely a mystery. But because of what it does, we can assume God created it to wipe everything out. The dragons, however, are an enemy of the flower, and they have the power within them to destroy it. It might have been part of the reason they were created in the first place. But despite their purpose, upon being transported to the year 856, they became the enemy of humanity, likely by complete accident. With the dragons' lifespans so long, all they ever knew was battle. Ever since they could remember, they were always
the dragons were made to destroy the Black Flower. That's the flower in the eye, girl.
There were so many dragons, it was even described as having the numbers
is the flower
the sun with their sheer numbers.
That's sick.
One day,
is that the Lunateer?
Some white explosion caused everything to vanish. Their numbers became rare, their enemies disappeared, and the Earth itself changed.
I definitely wouldn't play Drakengard 1.
Whatever this white explosion was,
maybe 3 is okay though, I don't know.
They were transported to Drakengard. It is perhaps unlikely that they were even aware of what happened during the moment, as all of this information comes from a dragon in hindsight recounting these events. So upon being transported, and always being in battle, they may have perhaps just attacked humanity, as war was what they were always doing. And humanity,
dragons accidentally showed up in the past
fighting against the
to prevent the destruction of the universe.
A war which justified both sides trying to defend and kill each other. And just like that, ironically enough, the dragons became the biggest threat humanity faced. And after about 10 years of suffering,
even though it should have been the Death Flower,
banded together and cast aside the concept of individual countries and became one unified body known as Midgard.
Midgard.
We'll be jumping through time pretty fast as civilization, technology, and life all advances.
The land of sands,
cities and villages being reduced to ash,
Cathedral
many
City.
Survivors fled to Cathedral
How in the world do you
City
imagine a story like this?
Humanity's last.
I feel like I kind of know. I've seen so much media. I feel like I kind of know where he's getting some inspirations from, and I really like it. It's cool.
Shelter. This city would largely consist of nobles and intellectuals from past kingdoms.
But man, Yoko is crazy, bro. Like, he really definitely gets ideas and he like mismatches together and he tries to make a more cohesive story overall.
It's basically a magical element. Humans within areas containing high concentrations of
very much
Maso
like Kingdom Hearts shit in a way,
and change into many mythological creatures we are aware of today. Fairies, elves, trolls, minotaurs, and orcs are but a handful of subhuman species created from those exposed to these magical particles. And as such, magic became a real thing. Many people began finding themselves able to utilize it for strange powers and
Maso would be very important.
The social hierarchy. The Magic Academy was formed within Cathedral City to study more about magic and was created by the church, who began worshipping users capable of miracles.
And that's the one that came from Dragon Town.
The Academy pretty much oversaw everything across Midgard. By this point, the people of the world had to establish new territories which fell under new rulers who became known as the Lords of the Lands. Life under their rule was pretty miserable. Huge power gaps
There's not even a single tree here. It's so different in my country.
Crime became rampant. Murder, extortion, torture, and abuse of power was common among soldiers against women and children. The Lords often had few to no restrictions on their actions and would partake in sick and sadistic hobbies of their own. But I'll get to each of them individually a little later down the line. Basically, as time goes on, a whole lot of political drama goes on between
This is all the prequel hero to explain things.
Results in many
you just wanted to add all kinds of crazy shit in there, huh?
But in the year 995, an accident occurs within the Magic Academy inside Cathedral City. A female magician caused a large-scale accident by performing a forbidden art incorrectly. Details of this accident describe dust from the explosion resembling a giant flower which encompassed the entire city, and all traces of people within it disappeared and everything was reduced to ruins. It is perhaps whatever she did that allowed a portion of the black flower to escape from its captivity and enter the world.
A female mage accidentally brought part of the black flower into the world.
Around the year 985 is where we get our first story in this timeline. In the novella A Reign to End and a Flower to Begin, we follow the life of a young girl who would become our main character for this early part of the story, as we see the events that would inevitably set her off on her life's purpose.
She's very closely tied to the Lunateer.
As Zero, her childhood came just about as rough as they come. The world she lived in was a cruel one. She grew up in poverty.
He's establishing how this world works, and then he made Dragon Thirst be pretty cool.
Not even a name to call her own. To be fair, she never quite blamed her mother for their circumstance or the way she grew up or even how she treated her, as it was likely the exact same for her. It was only ever the lucky few children born into wealth who grew up with warm food and a roof over their head. The majority were forced to scavenge or steal just to survive. Most of the mothers around hardly cared about their children, as they were the result of an accidental pregnancy. As such, at a very young age, her mother sold her to a brothel for a very small, nigh insignificant amount of money. This became her new life, whether she liked it or not. Many of the girls at the
brothel.
brothel often conspired to escape via different methods, with very few, if any, ever succeeding. And this is where Indigo comes in. She was one of the other girls working in the brothel and befriended our main character early upon her arrival. She even gave Zero the name Usubeni, or Rose, due to the color of her eyes, having not actually had a name at the time. But Rose would learn a very harsh lesson early on. To her, she and Indigo were great friends, and after some time had passed, Indigo suggested they steal as much money as possible and run off together to start a new life. To Rose, this sounded wonderful, despite her life and the cruel world she lived in all this
name
time.
was originally Rose.
With Indigo, she felt they could do anything. There was a true sense of happiness she had with her. So the two stole the money and ran off. Their escape plan was a man waiting with a horse. It was a patron of the brothel who fancied Indigo for some time now. But when the two girls got to him, Rose was betrayed. Indigo was never friends with her. She was
Indigo left
and building up their friendship
with her man. Oh my god.
She needed an extra pair of hands to help carry the gold they stole.
That's
Rose
fucked.
was supposed to be killed right then and there. However, pursuers came and gave chase, so Indigo and her man made off with all the money. And Rose was left with a harsh lesson in trust. Particularly, she could trust only herself. She was brought back to the brothel. However, her desire for freedom did not end that day. Several months later, she made yet another escape attempt. However, this time, it was actually successful. She stole even more money than before, but to make sure she wasn't pursued like last time, she slaughtered everyone that might potentially come after her. She poisoned
the
men
witnesses.
And killed them while they were unconscious.
Holy
the pursuers,
shit.
their underlings, and even the women. No life was spared as she stealthily took the lives of anyone who might know her or come after her.
So
And
she
with
just
that,
erased her
she
existence.
escaped with bountifuls of gold in hand. But while she may have learned a few things from her experience with Indigo, she now faced a new problem along with a new lesson: bandits. Being alone meant that she was an easy target, and an even more valuable one if she had anything of worth on her. She
Bunch
was
of money.
robbed
What a happy
and
story.
yet again set
Yeah,
to be
exactly.
sold to another brothel.
What
However,
the
before
fuck,
that time
dude?
came, she escaped with only her life this
You
time.
want a supervillain?
In
This
her
is how
mind,
you create
she could
supervillains.
have nothing, and she could trust no one. This was the only logical answer for her to live out the rest of her life as.
Your man
It was miserable,
Yoko Taro
rough,
really wants
and
fucking
lonely.
supervillain
And
women.
to top things off, she
He's
had
very much
contracted
into
an
that.
incurable scourge plaguing the area and its people, so she was already living on borrowed time. Her life was spent wandering aimlessly, pilfering food and clothes as she came by them, and her habit of killing persisted. If she saw a warm meal on the table of someone's house, she would murder everyone in it just so she could eat.
Yeah,
House to
totally
house,
logical.
family to family,
Totally logical.
whether it was
Mass
the
murder.
rich or the poor, it didn't matter to
'em all.
her. So long as there was something for her to take, she would. There was no sense of morality in her actions, simply whatever was best for her. Even when the children of these families begged for their lives, the prospect they would simply forgive and forget her killing their
Supervillain will have
parents
some
was too
connection
much
to
of a
flowers. Not
risk
sure why. Maybe he
compared
wanted to be a
outright
botanist.
killing them. No one was spared the tip of
Yeah, her name's
blade.
literally Rose.
Her body count racked up well into the triple digits before a bounty was put out for her arrest.
Her
The
body
reward
count. That's
was
different.
handsome,
Different kind
and
of
so
body
it pretty
count, but
much
yeah.
became impossible for her to run anymore before
Kill streak.
she was caught.
She had a
By
3,
this point,
dude.
the disease
That's like
had taken its
how
toll,
many
but
nukes is that in
not
Call of
enough to
Duty?
kill her just
300 plus
yet.
kill streak.
Upon being arrested, she was whipped for every single
Sick
life
ass
she
300 plus
stole,
KD.
which fortunately they didn't truly know, or else she definitely would have been dead. Afterwards, she was chained up and left to die in the town square. Alongside her were 5 other girls also sentenced to death. Unlike our main character, their intentions were quite virtuous. They attempted to start a revolt against the tyrannical lord who oppressed the people in hopes to give everyone a better life. But their dreams were shot down before it ever had the chance to blossom. One of their own ratted them out, and the 5 girls were captured and tortured. Their bones broken, their fingernails ripped from their hands, their eyes gouged out, and so much more. Even to
Why?
Rose, their fate felt far too cruel for how good they were. By the time Rose was strung up, 4 of the girls had already died, with the leader, the last one, holding on through sheer willpower alone. The two then have a relatively nice interaction before the remaining rebel dies, but to the end held true to her sense of justice and belief in her actions in what she was trying to accomplish. As the remaining survivor, Rose was sent to be burnt at the stake. However, before that had the chance to happen, the culmination of her injuries as well as her sickness finally caught up to her, and she died.
Right.
But it seems the world wasn't done with her just yet.
She didn't actually die.
In her dying moments, she bore witness to a rose-colored flower blooming before her very eyes.
Rose-colored.
This was in fact a fragment of the black flower that was sealed within Cathedral City. Like Rose, it was weak and dying, so it took root within her corpse and birthed her with new life. She was cured of her illness and given her magical ability far more powerful than that of normal magic. She became known as an intoner. It's a definition given to those who are magically enhanced thanks to the flower. Being an intoner comes with a plethora of abilities. They can manipulate magic.
And that flower exists because of that.
Their speed and reflexes, heal
because of the female mage who accidentally brought a piece of the black flower to the world, right?
To summon watchers, the servants of God and instruments meant to destroy humanity. Over the next 8 months, Rose learns all about her new abilities, but also the flower's purpose. She learned that the flower is slowly consuming both her body and mind, turning her into a puppet.
She does have a flower in her eye.
Once the flower fully takes root, it will unleash world devastation. Rose was just a tool in the flower's goal to destroy humanity. Having no interest in being controlled or destroying the world, Zero makes an attempt at her own life. She stabs herself.
She gets named Zero at some point,
sword, hoping to end things right then and there.
Yeah,
but the flower, in an act of self-preservation, sensed her hostility and created 5 young clones of Rose. They too were intoners and possessed a fragment of her personality.
She got 5 clones.
Rose attempted to kill them while they were still small and frail, but was incapable when the eldest sister, One, protects her sisters. Too weakened from her suicide attempt, all 5 girls managed to escape. Rose would then swear to kill all of them and rid the world of the flower's existence.
Is she Rose or Zero?
The cost. Respectively, all of the sisters would go on to be known as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It is also here that Rose adopted the alias of Zero. As she is the original, and it is her duty to deal with her sisters.
I see.
For the sisters, they are an amalgamation of a few separate things all mashed together in
the fuck
one.
Is this super happy anime girls with numbers?
All stem from different places. For example, the memories of the 5 girls' past are all different. In fact, they would all actually directly come from the 5 girls who died in the square alongside Zero before she obtained the flower. In terms of their appearance, they all came from different people Zero had encountered throughout her life. 5's body, for example, was that of a nun she had killed back when she was stealing food to survive. And One was actually that leader girl she had talked to with her eyes gouged out for having tried to overthrow the Lord. One possessed the same voice, hair, and likely...
This is what I never followed. Too weird. You know what, bro? I'm not even... Honestly, it's funny, right? Because certain franchises kind of do these things as well. It's not... It does get a little overcomplicated. Because if you're someone like Yoko Taro, right? You want to create a franchise that has like a... You want to keep expanding on the world you made. Kind of like Star Wars in a way as well. Like they kind of expanded on it and certain things don't make sense. Kingdom Hearts is a perfect example of the first few ideas. Like Kingdom Hearts 1 and 1 really was meant to end there. But then like when I first played it, it was very clear it was meant to end there. But it was a little like loose. It was open. I probably follow it better if I play the game first, but I only played the Nier games. Okay, yeah. It was clearly meant to end there, and then 2 and 3, and then all the other Kingdom Hearts games, they keep expanding on 1 to the point where it gets very complicated, just like this. They start having fucking clones, dream worlds. They start having all kinds of shit, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, and it's not like 100% like cohesive. But it's just like the artists, the creators, they want to keep expanding the story with multiple different ideas, and they're kind of like throwing things in there, and they're trying to make it. Yeah, wait till you hear the story of 3. Yeah, so I'm not too surprised. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then oh, we want to have like 5 of these girls to become the antagonists, but how are they gonna? Oh, it'll be people who she killed, right? You can imagine like they were in the back room somewhere. Oh, it could have been somebody. All the people she killed because she was a murderer, right? I got you.
The same eyes.
But they can be cool ideas sometimes, though. Like
the other 3's appearances are unknown, but they were likely
Drinking
either
Guard.
from
Oh,
the
they were in
brothel
number
or
3.
girls she had killed while stealing food. It's
Yeah.
also important to note that each of the girls are afflicted with a type of curse, a price they must pay for their ability to use the power of songs. One's senses grow keener with each passing day. Her sense of smell, taste, hearing, and so on.
You know, Panda, honestly, bro, if you ever have the time, you should try getting into the Kingdom Hearts franchise. I feel like if you like worlds that are very complex like this, you would like it, because they go into similar ideas, like the nobodies. These 5 girls remind me of the nobodies.
Become much more sensitive over time. 2's physical strength gradually grows despite her appearance. 3's hair grows uncontrollably and she needs to cut it daily.
What the
4's
fuck?
fingernails grow at an alarming rate and she's made a habit of biting them off. And 5's breasts enhance with seemingly each passing day.
Yes!
Of course, unlike the other.
That's his favorite girl right there. Number 5, I already know this cultured ass degenerate Yoko Taro. That's his favorite girl. Her breast gets bigger every day. Come on now.
Other 5 girls, 5 doesn't mind hers as much as it increases her self-confidence and bravado. But in terms of personality, let's take them one by one.
Her titties get bigger.
Received a fragment of Zero's.
Oh, dude, her titties get bigger as time passes by. Oh, the cultured fucking guy, man.
5 represents Zero's lustful issues and insensitivity towards sexual topics. She has a relentless craving and, like Zero, will kill anyone just to get some food. 5 is crude and horny, full of confidence and greed. She has an insatiable desire for pretty much everything: men, food, clothing. But whenever she gets what she desires, it isn't too long before she becomes bored of it and throws it away. 4 reminds Zero of herself when she was still a young girl thrown into the brothel and how she tried to hold on to the smallest bits of pride she still had left.
Yeah, so every one of the girls represent a piece of her and her memories. Yeah, this whole thing is a ruse to explain why he made well-enhanced female characters. Yeah,
with a refined personality of a good and responsible listener. However, she is also Zero's embodiment of her desire to be accepted and loved by others.
Dragon Guard 3 almost seems like
an enormous inferiority complex. She's jealous of her sister's beauty, such as 5, and constantly craves one's praise and acknowledgement. When 4 becomes paranoid, she rejects everyone in her life, hating the entire world, exactly the same as when 0 chose to stop trusting others. 3
ends up being
Zero's wild, selfish, and twisted side. 3 has no remorse or empathy for her twisted actions. She's lethargic,
this is just like Nobody's,
energy, but has a very dangerous temperament. However, her obsession with dolls is completely unlike
Did you really
this
think
side of her. When fixated on something she truly loves, she becomes hyper-focused and very talkative. She's regarded by the sisters as the most beautiful amongst the group, which they find unfortunate due to her general disposition. 2 is Zero's life in what could have been. She's bright and cheerful with the ability to get along with just about anyone she meets. She's a type of motherly figure, caring greatly about others and their well-being. She loves the world and is carefree, even able to find true love. And 1 is possibly the greatest aspect of Zero, which is her strong sense of justice in the world. In Zero's final moments before she died, she was unsatisfied and unable to comprehend why everything was so unjust. She hated wrongdoers, the corrupt, and oppressors. Just before dying, she wanted a just and logical world, and that's what 1 embodies: a strong sense of justice, seriousness, and intelligence. 1 finds it her responsibility to care for the well-being of others and make the world a better place. These 5 were born of the flowers' existence and as such serve as vessels of its will, whether they know it or not. Like Zero, the flower rooted within them is inevitably going to blossom and bring world devastation. And at the same time, they too are intoners and can utilize the power of song to their benefit. Basically, everything Zero knew in regards of how to utilize it, they kinda know as well. Ironically, these 5 do care greatly about the world and its people, and that would be very evident in what they did with
You
their
have to tell me
lives
what you decide.
shortly after their birth.
I could tell her no.
The manga series Utahime
Yeah.
5 shows us the story of the 5 sisters running up to the events before the game.
The fuck, dude? So they have like a whole ass live. All the 5 girls have a
The
whole
beginning
anime
months
live.
following these girls' birth were
Huh? Ask him? He wouldn't know. He won't be home in time. I'm at 3. I don't think so. Okay.
initially spent as a traveling superhero band, as odd
You
as
sure?
that may sound.
Wait,
But
are we able to pick up the stuff some other day? Oh, okay. You say whenever, huh? I mean, that's what you bought, so at least it wasn't like a single day ticket or anything. Might as well stop by. Yeah. Sorry about that, guys. My
through
bad.
doing this,
My
they were
sister.
able to witness the cruelties of the world and see just how corrupt the lords of the lands really are. And so, the 5 girls set off on a journey to overthrow these leaders and free
What?
Midgard them.
Yeah, both. Well, no, we're just gonna give him a ride. We could pick him up and drop him off. That's it. Nothing else. Yeah. So we can just go after. I don't know what time does that place close. You check. Check. Pretty sure you can.
themselves. Their
Right?
first target was Lord Bass from the Land of Sands. He certainly is a twisted and
Huh?
ruthless individual.
2:30.
He doesn't care much
So just
about
check.
anything, including his own kingdom, outside of his own sickening hobbies.
Oh my
He
God.
decorates his castle using the flesh and bones of children and slaves. Pretty much
Huh?
everything from little figurines to rugs to dolls, he crafts using the subjects from his own
What
land.
the fuck?
And when the families come to appeal to him asking for their children back, he strings them up, leaving them for dead for all to see. The 5 girls arrive
Yeah, is that kind of like from the story? Did he get that from the story in Replicant? You know that story where like the castle with all the bloody and all the corpses and all the blood and shit? Did he get that from that? What? That's fine. We can make it in time to
Arrive
get
at
this.
his
At least to get it.
castle and swiftly deal with the outside
Not sure.
guards.
It seems like it,
While
kind of, right?
various traps and other abominations
castle gates,
lie
yeah.
in wait on the inside,
What the
they
fuck?
too are dealt with until
Bro, this is the backstory of the girls. They had the rise of the empire, the Dragon Card 3 story summary. Holy shit. Between years 1000 and 1099. Damn, this fucking... Yo, this video? This guy did his due diligence. And when I mean due
Bass
diligence, I
himself
mean this
chooses
man
to
put in
confront them
his
personally.
work. He
pilots a
researched
giant golem, which
all
he hopes
of
to overwhelm
Yokotaro's
the
work.
sisters with. However,
Holy fucking
it's all
shit.
for naught. One uses her power of song to increase her physical strength and movement speed, and she is capable of taking down the golem. Lord Bass in his defeat would beg for mercy, attempting to justify his actions. However, he's simply wasting his breath. To truly protect the world, the lords must die. And so one
Not
disintegrates
gonna lie
his
though,
head with
we
a
could probably skip through the Utahime 5.
sheer amount
Because these girls end up dying anyway, I'm assuming, at the end of Dragon Guard 3 or
of
some shit,
superhuman
right?
strength. As the wall crumbles over the former lord's corpse, we are introduced to Partition. He was Lord Bass's assistant, however
Partition.
likely has relations to another lord, Cerulia. She rules the Land of Seas and utilizes magic,
The Land
most
of
notably
Seas.
to keep a youthful appearance. She steals the youth of others for her own personal gain. Partition, too, is a magician and does a similar form of magic to keep himself looking young. Both of them are obsessed with whatever magical strength lies behind the Mercurius Gate in Cathedral City, which we currently know is the Black Flower. Rumor has spread that behind the gate are the secrets to all magic, and many have taken interest in trying to obtain it. It's likely the two were in cahoots to obtain this power, and so branched out hoping to find a solution faster. But nevertheless, since we're already on the topic of other lords, there is also Gray, who rules the Land of Mountains, and his son, Shaxor, who rules
Land
the
of
Land
Mountains.
of Forests. Knowledge about their kingdoms and their wrongdoings aren't shown in any detail. We just have to imagine they're on an equal level as Bass and Cerulia. These three's goal is to obtain whatever power lies within Cathedral City. This is important because Partition tells the sisters about this power as well, since it is their goal to become stronger and
There's so
practice
much
their
other
skills so they can
stories
one
that
day
go
take on Zero when their paths inevitably
through this
cross
Dragon
again.
Guard stuff,
He
dude.
convinces
What the
them to
fuck?
venture to Cathedral City to obtain this power, and so they all set out. On their journey, however, their ship is attacked
Little
by a
Mermaid, yeah.
kraken-like sea monster, and amidst the chaos, one is
Kraken-like
pulled into
sea-
the ocean.
Oh my
and none
god.
of the
Bro,
sisters are
some of
able to
these
help her.
drawings.
Fortunately, one is more than capable of handling herself. She and the sea beast wash up ashore on some random island. However, after thinking the monster was dead, it makes a
This is what
surprise
happens when you make a video game and then release
attack,
novellas,
but
yeah.
is interrupted when a dragon lands on its head and kills it.
It looks
This
cool though,
is
I'll tell you what.
Gabriella, one of the few and only relevant dragons that still roam Midgard. Her encounter with one was not by chance. In
These are
fact,
just
she had
comic books,
crossed
dude.
paths with Zero prior and was
These are
curious
just
as
straight
to what her
mangas,
existence
comic books, you
was.
know? Like,
She was able to sense the odd nature of being an intoner and didn't know what that was. So, following the sense of presence, she wound up coming face to face with one, but is notably able to tell the difference in the two's power level. Zero exerts immense strength to the point that even Gabriella describes her as a monster, while one appears weak, but she states her desire to protect the world. Their conversation is interrupted as Gabriella wasn't the only one looking for one. The other three lords have dispatched an assassin to track down and kill the sisters.
so the Black Flower within Zero senses her hostility at some point in time, creates five clones of her, numbered 1 through 5, puts them somewhere else, and they kind of
The
grow up
assassin
together.
is Bardis, who, if you recall,
The
I
fuck?
mentioned was originally within Cathedral City when it
Uh-huh. Oh, it's after, anytime after? Yeah, I mean, that's cool. We could probably
first
still,
arrived.
even if,
He
I
was
don't know,
found
we'll see.
by the lords within the walls guarding the gate to the Black Flower. A lot of time has passed since then, and he's kind of forgotten his purpose. And so the lords were just able to command him, and he followed their orders. Bardis is of immense strength and power.
Everything's
Not
of
only is he
immense strength.
physically capable of overpowering both one and Gabriella, but his body is able to regenerate from any damage he sustains.
The fuck?
He's most certainly not human, and whatever technology he was made out of in whatever era he was plucked from makes him a real force to be reckoned with.
They don't explain
As
him,
stated,
his
he
abilities
easily
here.
takes care of one and has no problem overpowering Gabriella. But just when things are looking bad, one unlocks her intoner mode. She pushes
Intoner
herself
mode?
further beyond her known limits and unleashes a barrage of relentless attacks onto Bardis,
Intoner
decimating
mode?
and ripping his body to shreds. But even
Oh.
this was not enough to kill the mysterious warrior. He regenerates, but this time with the physical appearance of a young boy. But it was enough to continue living another day. Having pushed herself past her physical limits, one fell into a coma for the next month.
This guy
Gabriella
put
was
an
impressed by her
entire
capabilities
backstories
as well
to
as her
these
desire
to
to
these
protect the
clones.
world. And so she decides to take her unconscious and exhausted body and look after it until she wakes up. In the meantime, there's another story that we need to follow that was happening simultaneously as well, and that's what Zero was doing. After her sister's birth, Zero spent most of her time researching everything she could about the flower's origin. She found some books from Cathedral City which detailed the
This is why I never read much of Drakengard 3. There's a lot going on, huh? Alright, we can skip through to Human 5, honestly. It sounds interesting. Maybe I'll look at that on my own time.
Each sister would become the leader of one to use her power to the best of her ability.
So at some point somebody kills all the lords, right?
Of the lands having been vanquished,
because at some point
each sister would become the leader of one of each land respectively.
The sisters take control of each of the lands.
The new era of the Intoner Empire began. The girls made swift policies that benefited the common people, keeping them out of poverty and famine, and former nobility were punished, particularly those who tried to oppose their rule. They restructured and formed their own new armies. Within the span of a year, the girls effectively reshaped the entire world. All forms of religion virtually ended and were replaced by Intonerism. Whether it be their loyal soldiers or the everyday common folk, the girls were worshipped as goddesses for what they had done. And
bro, that's crazy. So, okay, within the time span of this girl Zero's life, right? She was supposed to die in an increasingly cruel and unjust world. Just kidding, she didn't. The Black Flower just magically found her body and decided to be like, this is a nice corpse. Let me live in here real quick. Wait, hold on. I gotta keep her alive. Wait, hold on. She finds out at some point that the Black Flower is the death of all things. Oh shit. Alright, well, we'll have backup plan 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Oh, those backup plans end up being their own beings with their own traits that end up influencing the rest of the world because of their powers. Take control of all the lands, unify it, and create it, make it whole, and make it better for everyone.
The living conditions were made
the Black Flower is
better
almost
for the
like
people.
nano machine,
Monster
son.
Population decreased. The world really did become a better place under their rule. From here, each sister would go off and do their own thing in their respective region. One would naturally take up control within Cathedral City, where she spent her time trying to
Not gonna lie though, actually the 5 sisters and the whole Zero thing is actually really fucking interesting. The fact that it's not a game and it's just all in these mangas is a little bit of a shame. I don't know. It's kind of cool.
What exactly?
I'm telling you, bro. Yoko Taro is 100% into comic books. There's just no way.
True, but despite her best
this
efforts,
is very much like comic book shit.
Documents whatsoever pertaining to an Intoner's origin, leaving her to simply act on her own ideals. 2 was put in charge of the Land of Sands, hoping that her cheerful and optimistic attitude.
My man Yoko Taro is trying to be like the next. Who was the guy who made all the Marvel comics? The one who died
due to her
like a few years ago.
Strange creatures. The fairies and elves that reside in the area
the old guy
far outweigh
who died?
the number of humans, but 3 gave them their space instead of trying to subjugate them like the lords. So everyone's happy. 4 was given the Land of Mountains due to her habit of uncontrolled outbursts. She was unreliable to rule a larger kingdom.
He's gonna basically be another Stanley.
Has a very sparse population.
At some point, he wants to be, I guess.
5 was chosen for the Land of Seas. Its people are very rowdy, and 1 was hoping that 5 would rein them in.
This whole lore video is crazy.
But each of the girls were not alone in their rule. With them came their disciples. If you recall, during Zero and her sister's encounter at Cathedral City, she enchanted 4 doves and sent them to their respective Intoner to siphon off and deprive them of the flowers' power as much as possible. It worked, but what Zero didn't expect was that the power they had siphoned gave them a human form. Dido, Octa, Cent, and Decadus were unexpected life forms now brought into the world.
She made more life forms by trying to siphon away the Black Flower's power within the sisters. It's gonna feel so different when we get to Nier. Yeah, I mean, actually, I kind of like what he's trying to do with Drakengard. Now, it doesn't fit the overall arching theme of Nier, right? But it kind of does, because the blooming the looming threat is always the black flower in the background, right? It's supposed to be the universe-ending power. Technically, Zero is kind of the good person here, trying to prevent the end of the universe. The sisters, just wanting to live their own lives and create a better place, are actually in the way of the salvation of existence.
As a disciple, it is their job to assist their
Which, in a way, it's always a fucking tragic story with Yoko Taro, man.
Their loyalty is absolute,
what the fuck?
and as such, they can never defy the intoner they serve. Each of them effectively became their right-hand man. On top of that, they are also a tool to help regulate the girls' sex drive.
Well, people who are Drakengard fans think Nier is not a great plot because it really doesn't have anything to do with Drakengard plot, even though it's in the same universe. Often think Nier. Yeah, you know, honestly, I would see that if people really did follow the Drakengard lore and all that, they would feel like it's not the same and it should be its own separate thing, because it's very, very different. It's very much its own mythology. It's very clear it's its own mythology.
Connected to the flowers' power. Since the flower's influence is so strong, having sex is how the disciples siphon and help regulate that power within them. With their help, the girls are also able to summon their respective watcher. A disciple could summon a watcher without the aid of the intoner song, however, it would cost them their life. So let me go through and give a rundown on each disciple and who they serve. Dido is Five's disciple. He's a very abrasive and baneful young man. Despite his boyish appearance, he is deceptively cruel, sarcastic, impatient,
this
and
is so
can
much
be incredibly...
The whole Drakengard thing just reminds me of Kingdom Hearts, like, a lot. It reminds me a lot of Kingdom Hearts.
At times. Unfortunately for him, he hates being Five's disciple. She is the most sexually active of all the
without
sisters
it being
and
as
has the
dark,
highest
honestly,
libido.
though.
Dido is her favorite sex toy, and so she will frequently force herself upon him
Oh my
throughout all
God.
hours of the day.
What the
Unable
fuck?
to disobey his intoner, Dido is forced to put up with it. He does always express his disdain for her and her appearance, which she only finds adorable. This is only really a problem for him because his real attraction is more towards the grotesque. He finds the inside of a human, such as guts, much more of a turn-on than he does that of traditional beauty standards, which Five possesses. Decadus is Four's disciple. Comparatively to the others, he is the most normal and is considered to be the most loyal amongst them. He is often described as a perfect gentleman as he speaks in a polite and mannered style. However, behind his perfectly well-mannered demeanor, he is an extreme masochist. Any form of pain and agony he goes through gets turned into his own personal reward. Whether it be physical or mental, whenever something harmful is happening to him, he can't help but get off to it, though he tries to suppress it, which often fails. Octa is Three's disciple.
Bro, what the fuck? What? Give us. Oh, you got it. Okay, cool. What the fuck, dude? Fucking Darkness from Konosuba getting off on masochism and shit.
He is
Holy
the wizened
shit.
old man of the group. He takes his job as a disciple very seriously, particularly when it comes to the sex aspect. He spends his day reading books for obtaining pleasure and perfecting his craft. He is so horny that his outlook on joy is seen as a hole itself which needs to be filled. He sees every hole in the world as a potential lover, including a black hole within space. It
He sees every hole in existence as a potential lover, even a black hole. Bro, what the fuck? What the actual fuck? This old man is so horny he would fuck a black hole, dude. What the fuck is Yoko Taro on? This man does drugs and just fantasizes all kinds of fucking shit.
To him, each hole has their own charm to it. Scent is Two's disciple. He's the suave and good-looking one of the group. However, he's incredibly dull. His intelligence is very minimal, and he'll often exaggerate or completely lie just to seem more bright and strong. What makes him different from the other intoners is his
We will sometimes tell people who play Nier that it's relatively tame and happy story for Yoko Taro stories. They don't understand until they see the stuff that's in Drakengard. Bro, Drakengard? Honestly, Yoko Taro should say fuck it. Just make like a M-rated like Drakengard games, and people will buy it. And just go like all in on his fucking fever dreams, as you call it, dude. Just go in on that shit. People will eat it up because it's fucked. It's so fucked and interesting. People will eat that shit up.
Relationship with 2. Unlike everyone else, Sent and 2 had fallen in
Holy
love
shit.
and are a perfect match for each other. Dido is repulsed by 5, but cannot disobey her advances. Decadus is a perfect gentleman to 4, but 4 wishes he was more forward and aggressive, making a move on her. And Octa is often not able to display his sexual expertise, as 3 is distracted by her own personal pet projects. Sent and 2 are the only couple whose interests align. 2 is infatuated with his suave personality and ravishing good looks, and Sent cherishes her entire being, willing to dedicate everything to protect her smile. As for 1, she was the only intoner not designated with a respective disciple. This didn't matter to her,
because
as
it was
she was
4
able to
doves.
bypass many of the negative effects
Sent
inflicted
and 2.
without using.
Yeah, because one of the girls named 2, and Sent is her disciple. Because it was 4 doves, right? It was something like 4 doves used at the cathedral that ended up being embodied into actual people that were like tied to the girls or whatever. Or at least 2, 3, or 4, 5. 1 didn't have one. It's my 2 cents.
However,
yeah,
she still wanted some sort of insurance policy. A backup in her fight against Zero, just in case she failed. And so 1 used one of her very own ribs and gave birth to a clone of herself.
What does that sound like to you? That sounds like Adam and Eve from Automata, right? And you know what's funny is when I play Automata, I made an observation about Adam and Eve, right? It was very biblical, obviously. Eve was born out of Adam's ribs. That's like a biblical story. That's like a part of their biblical story, right? Like women came from a rib from men or something like that.
This clone would also be known as 1, however would often be referred to as Brother 1. Unlike the other disciples, Brother 1's existence was kept a secret from everyone, including her sisters. He was trained in absolute secrecy with a single purpose to his life. If 1 were to die at the hands of Zero, it was his job to take her life. He was entrusted with a special sword made from one of Gabriella's fangs and sat in waiting for the inevitable day.
That's crazy.
And this leads us to the beginning of Drakengard 3. All of the intoners gather in Cathedral City to fend off their eldest sister together, while Zero launches an assault on the capital. Her first victim is Partition, who we met during the events of the manga. He was using magic to keep himself looking young, but when one saved Gabriella by sucking up all the magic in the area, he was transformed back to his real age. Since then,
I low-key kind of wish I started the stream a lot earlier today, because this lore stuff is cool.
He's been writing stories
very
singing
interesting.
the praises of the intoners and their accomplishments, but it doesn't last much longer.
Oh!
You murderous savage.
Oh, shit. What about Drakengard 3? Does that one play kind of cool?
I think you mean intoner.
Or is the gameplay kind of bull?
Take her down!
Damn, they just try to fire cannons at her.
Kill the traitorous demon!
I mean, I don't need to play, obviously. This summary is going to be the shit right here. So we know everything about Zero now. This is cool, though. This character's kind of sick, I'm not going to lie. Now, not too complex of a character. Pretty much like the beta version of Kaine. If you kind of really think about it, right? It was kind of like the first version of a character like Kaine that Yoko Taro wanted to create. But cool as fuck. It's better than Nier, but not like the newer games. Drakengard 3? This was made after OG Nier. Ah, I got you. Did Zero not exist in Drakengard 1 though?
Michael.
Or was Drakengard 1 which is a different story, like in the same universe? It's a PS3 game. Correct. Oh, I got you. So, Drakengard 1 was just like basically the world building. Zero's not in Dragon Guard 1. Dragon Guard 1 is just a normal story within the world then, or what?
It's time to put an end to the intoners.
This video doesn't actually go over, it doesn't go over Dragon Guard 1, actually.
Of
But I guess
course,
Dragon
none of
Guard
her sisters are trying to
is a
hide
Japanese
and meet
medieval
her
fantasy,
at the
yeah.
cathedral. After a brief interaction, everyone fights. Zero is surprisingly able to hold her own despite being clearly outnumbered, but of course, this
is
a
something
fight to the
straight
death,
out of, like,
and
Kingdom
no
Hearts,
one is
dude.
here to play games.
I don't know, it
One
just
then
looks like it to
summons
me.
Gabriel, who blasts Zero, taking
Gabriel.
her arm as
This-
casualty. Gabriel is in fact
Moving
Gabriella
arms.
yet again in her beast form. While one worked hard to protect and revert her beastification during the events of the manga, after she was finished training Brother 1 and this day was drawing closer and closer, she knew that in her current form she was no match for Michael. To see one's dreams fulfilled, she needed to be as strong as she could possibly be, which is why she asked One to make her a beast once more. It's evident that she complied, but it had a noticeable effect on One's attitude. After the transformation, she became rather untalkative and never genuinely smiled again. Anyway, that's why Gabriella is now Gabriel. As things are looking bad for Zero, Michael
Interesting.
is able to show up just in the nick of time and fire a blast at One. But the other sisters use their power of song to protect her. This
power of
gives
song.
Gabriel enough time to fire yet another blast. Michael uses
And
his
dragon
own
on
body
dragon
to
violence for
protect
her.
Zero, but Gabriel has become so strong that the blast is powerful enough to be fatal. While Zero and Michael are able to flee to safety, Michael is forced to use his last wish to reincarnate. He is reborn as Mikhail, and is quite staunchly different to his previous form.
What the
Mikhail
fuck?
is much more of a child in his attitude, knowledge, and demeanor. Most of his development through the game is working on these things. Before we continue any further, I need to give context to the events that I'm going to be detailing. Anyone familiar with
Maybe
the
you don't see a
Dragon Guard
future
or
at
Nier
all.
series knows that there are a multitude of different endings for each of these games, and any of these endings can wind up branching into their own different timeline. Dragon Guard 3, more than any, deals with this concept. Zero is a singularity, meaning she is an entity that is powerful enough to cause a branch within a timeline in which history completely changes. Believe me, this is and
just like
will
the
be
time
more
variance at
relevant
30
than you might
shit,
think.
yeah.
One of the gimmicks of Dragon Guard 3 is witnessing these different branches. But ironically enough, none of the
There's a
in-game
chord.
branches are what is considered the canonical order of events. Which is why in 2014 a novelization of the game's narrative was released to better connect everything. It borrows many
Cool.
aspects of the events we see from the varying branches and combines them into one while simultaneously adding things never before seen. So
That's
footage
cool.
for everything doesn't quite exist, and I promise I'm not accidentally combining the different branches. Fortunately, Zero's journey itself isn't all too convoluted. She simply travels to each of her sisters' kingdoms to kill them with not much story or development happening on her end. Her outlook is already set in stone. She knows that her sisters are born of the flower, and she feels like it is her responsibility to correct that mistake. If anything, it's each of her sisters' point of view that will wind up spending more time on. And that makes sense, because the flower's influence over them is slowly taking hold. The journey starts at the Land
Interesting.
of Seas with 5. Zero displays a very
Cities.
ruthless act of violence against her sister, which leaves her in quite an unsavory position. Despite this, she is able to live and only taken out thanks to Dido, who has found his opportunity to betray her. He finally gets to express
Dido
his
finally
disgust
gets
with
to
her and
kill
all
her.
of the acts
You're
he was forced to
disgusting.
partake
I
in
mean-
before joining Zero's company.
Based on this man's origin story, yes, he should have killed her. Holy fuck, dude.
Yet still, even
The woman was just
despite this,
taking advantage of
5
him.
continued to live. It's the only thing she wanted in her final moments. She was willing to give up her voice, her sight, who she is. If there's one thing that has been at the core of 5's being, it's her desire and obsession with things. She was never satisfied, always wanting more, and her desire for life here gave her strength. Or it gave the flower enough strength to be reborn. But she wouldn't play a role again
That's
until
like a
later
dark
down
5.
the line. As for 4, she's going through her own struggles. She, more than any of her sisters, wanted to stop
It's sort of
fighting,
about sorrow
but
side. What
because
is
it
sorrow
was
side?
evident that such a dream was impossible, she began having nightmares out of fear. These nightmares persisted for quite a while, which only infuriated her more and amplified her inferiority complex. She didn't understand
Killing your
why
sisters.
this
Oh my
was
God.
happening to her, as she's done nothing wrong to deserve it. And on top of that, Decadus wasn't comforting her or acting in the way that she wanted, which only made her more angry. She slowly devolved into a state of delusion, believing that her own followers, maids, and soldiers were plotting to kill her, which led her to
Got
preemptively
increasingly
killing them.
paranoid.
She began to think everyone was a spy working for the enemy. This even extended to Decadus, and he was banished from her land. Without him there to pacify the flower's influence, 4 loses her mind and kills everyone around her. 0 and the others stumble across Decadus, where they have him lead them to her so they can put her to rest. After seeing the mental state she's in, 0 kills her. Before we get to 3, we actually have to first go over 2, because her story is quite a bit different and almost disconnected from the others. I mentioned in Scent's segment about how he and 2 were able to fall in love. I've been talking about how she is the most cheerful and is a motherly figure to her sisters and her subjects. In the aftermath of the campaign against the Lords, she and Scent began traveling the world and defeating horrific monsters together. During their journey, they came across many orphan children left behind following the aftermath. And so they opened an orphanage. 2 loved them dearly, treated them like they were her own children. They were some of her greatest responsibilities, and it catered perfectly to her personality. As such, Scent also tried his best to contribute in the most effective way he thought, with magic. Scent had been using 2's power of song to not only enhance their soldiers so they can better protect, but also using magic to heal the children's wounds.
How much do you
This
want to
wouldn't
bet
have
bad
been
things
a
happen to the
problem
children?
if
Oh my
not
God.
for the unforeseen negative side effects it wound up having on them. Each soldier was corrupted and turned into a savage monster. As for the
Zombies?
children, they were horrifically all conjoined and merged into a homunculus.
What the
Scent and
fuck?
2 had to fight their way through and slaughter their own soldiers and people, as well as having to put down the innocent children that she loved, all because of an unforeseen
Yo, low-key, Dragon Card 3 seems really cool. What the fuck?
accident.
I
To
mean,
be fair, while Scent was using the magic, he had no idea it would turn out this way. It still
Fuck.
originated from the Black Flower, after all.
only on
Because it
PS3
was
though,
her
huh?
power,
That's fucked.
2 solely blamed herself for the incident. She took all the weight on her shoulders and she wasn't able to handle it. This
Rest in
event
peace.
broke her mind. She was tormented by guilt and haunted by her actions. She pretty much became catatonic after this, with Scent having to look over her moving forward. But to be fair, this event wasn't the sole
Yeah,
cause.
it's all
It
good.
just so
I don't
happened to be
mind.
the thing
Like I
that
said,
pushed
I'm still gonna commit to the idea of not playing it because I like the story, but a lot of these games they won't play as good. You know, like
her over the edge. The truth is, 2 was incredibly
gonna be like
keen
those-
to the flowers' true nature. In the beginning, she believed her
and I
power
feel like the way this is being told in the video is probably more interesting than the actual gameplay because the gameplay, like, you won't capture these kind of things going on
was
because it's like
altruistic.
it's an older
She
game,
never
so I
doubted
wasn't.
it and thought that with it, she would be able to protect her loved ones and the world would be able to find
Yeah,
peace
right, yeah.
because of it. But as she gained more power, she felt something.
This guy did a
trying
really
to
good job
take
of
her
capturing
over. She
everything
thought that it was
chronologically
just
and
because
adding
she
the
was
proper
weak and
context,
she
though.
needed to strengthen her mind. But what was really keeping her fighting against it, allowing her to stay in control, was thinking about the people she loved. Scent, the children, the people of her land. The idea of everyone coming together and being able to be with their loved ones kept her from succumbing to this entity as she fought for that future. But after she had to kill the soldiers and children with her own hands, she couldn't hold it back anymore, and the power swallowed her. Since then, she never eats, she never talks, she hardly moves, she's just a shell. But regardless, Scent continued to look after her. He cared for her in whatever way he could.
She just lost
until
her
one
will
day,
to live,
2
bro.
was able to regain control. Ironically enough, as her body began to starve and became weaker, so did the power that the flower had on her. She was able to wrestle control back, but she now knows the dangers of the flower, believing that it should not exist. While she's still in control, she takes the moment to tell Sent that she loves him and asks that he continue living. 2 then kills herself.
Damn.
This story was important to include here because Sent would honor her final words. This is how he ends up in the company of Zero and the others when they go in search of 3 in the land of Forest.
So a lot of
However,
the disciples
before
end
their
up
search,
joining her?
Zombie 5 makes a reappearance. Having
Zombie
reattached
5.
all of her limbs, whatever little consciousness or understanding of hers remains was drawn to the flower's power that was resonating in the center of the forest. Dido then turns on all of the characters. Like I mentioned before, he loves rotted insides and things alike.
Oh,
now
no.
all of a sudden, 5 is his ideal woman and so turns to her side to please her. He summons Fanuel, however Sent interjects and summons Egg Grigori to counter. Ultimately, 5's fate remains the
What
same.
the fuck,
she is
bro?
once again killed by
He's
Zero.
like, actually, you're really hot now. Forget about all the our past. We could start over. Cause she's a rotting corpse. That's fucking
Bro, but this
weird, dude.
time, permanently. As for Dido, he didn't actually use 5's power to summon his Watcher. He did that by himself, which to a disciple is a death sentence. As such, all the power is stripped from him and he is reverted back to his dove form. The same fate
went back
befalls
into a
Sent,
dove.
however, he takes solace in his death.
Oh well. There's no point in living in a world without Lady 2 anyway. Now I can rest.
They returned to being doves? I mean, they came from doves, right?
3 is perhaps the sister who has been influenced by the flower the longest,
Like-
ever since infiltrating
I
Lord
can't do that
Bass's
sound. That I used to do it so
castle
well.
and seeing the
Shit.
dolls that he made from human bone as well as the monstrosities that he created in his catacombs, 3 developed a similar interest.
Wing slapping.
It wasn't exactly the same, but she became obsessed with creating dolls and the perfect soldier. She performed repeated experiments which involved both human and monster alike. She physically and mentally tortured them, hoping to find the secrets of what would make them the most powerful. Nearly every experiment broke, but she eventually learned that emotions were the true source of a human's power. So she murdered and tortured the loved ones of her experiments and watched as they grew resentful. She then fused them into becoming powerful monsters. She took utter delight in her sadistic and sociopathic hobby. It was the only time she wasn't lethargic or lazy and showed genuine excitement. Nearly
What the fuck? This character, number 2, is the most fucked up of the sisters. Holy shit! Talk about twisted, man.
everyone didn't approve
God
of 3's
damn.
hobby. 1 disavowed it and may have even perhaps poisoned 3's forest as a method of trying to get her to stop. And Octa, well, it kind of made him uncomfortable, and on top of
Octa.
that, his sexual needs weren't being met, so he abandoned her to join Zero. It's why he was with everyone during their battle with 5. Octa then leads the group to 3. During their battle, Decadus summons his Watcher to assist Zero, however, similarly with his Intoner dead, performing such an action comes at the cost of his
All the
human
disciples
form,
end up
and
just
he is reverted
sacrificing
back to a
themselves,
dove.
turning into
After
doves.
everything is said and done, Mikhail eats 3. All that remains is 1, so the characters all head to
Fucking-
Cathedral City. Considering this
All the
is where
doves,
things are
dude.
supposed to come to an end, Zero tells Mikhail that
All the
if she
disciples end
succeeds,
up
she
turning
wants
back to
him
doves.
to kill her, thus putting an end to the flower. On the path to 1, Octa would suffer the same fate as all of the other disciples. He uses his power to assist Zero, thus resulting in his death. 1 and 0 then come face to face once more. They exchange a brief conversation about their existence.
And then 1 has a
1 still holds
brother
true
1.
to her sense of justice. While she may have learned that she and her sisters are artificial lives, that doesn't take anything away from their souls. They were living beings who thought, felt, and acted. Just
And
because
live their own
Zero
lives.
brought them into the world doesn't mean that she had the right to take them out of it. This is why 1 hates her so much. But Zero knew that her actions were not moral, and she was never looking for forgiveness since the very beginning. This path was just something she had to do. 1 then summons
necessity.
Abdiel. But ultimately, after its defeat, she summons
You know,
Raphael.
dude, I'm telling you, it's just increasingly more interesting. The completely different ideas going on here, but they're good. They're really good.
After having discovered the poison in the Land of Forests,
Like,
she got the
every
idea
character's
to use it
motivation.
to weaken Zero and Mikhail.
It goes back to the
Zero
idea
was
like no
quite
one's a
taken
good
aback by
guy
this
or the
action,
bad guy. They
summoning
just
not only
everyone
one,
just
but two
lives
watchers without the aid of a
their own
disciple
lives and
not
follow their
succumb to
own
the flower's influence
incentives.
was a frightening amount of power. But like Abdiel, Raphael is also defeated. But fortunately for one, the poison had done quite a number on Mikhail.
Fighter.
And finally, in response, one summons Gabriel to finish things off. The moment gets quite passionate between 1 and 0. 1 has known for some time that the life she's being forced to lead is inevitably going to lead to death. She's kept searching for an answer that made sense as to
She
why
always
it
knew
had
she
to
was
be
supposed
this
to
way,
die.
but never found
The
it.
music,
The
dude.
two then activate their power of song and rush at each other, but Zero wins the duel.
Fuck,
She impales
dude.
one and slashes through her, killing both her last remaining sister as well as
Yeah, Nier
Gabriel.
Lore music.
The
in
two
fact.
did have a pact
Got
after
Gem?
all, which entwined their lives. But it wasn't over just yet. Gabriel had managed to deal a fatal blow to Mikhail before dying, which left his lifeless body in the aftermath. Zero was uncharacteristically saddened by this sight. Seeing his body made her reflect on their entire journey. Not only what they had
Don't
been
you
through,
die on me, you
but
asshole.
also
Don't you
her
dare
own
leave me
life.
alone again.
For all of the people she had betrayed in her lifetime, for how she never
She's very much
truly
kind of like a
trusted
Kaine character,
anyone,
you know?
It wasn't until Michael
Tragic
and
character,
subsequently Mikhail
tragic
came along
background
where she could finally place her
that
trust in
justifies
someone else.
her
For the
violence.
first time, she wanted someone other than herself to actually
She finally
live.
found someone
As
to
she grieved
love.
over Mikhail's corpse, she began
Dragon.
blaming the flower for everything. But amongst her rage, she got the idea that perhaps she could use the flower's regenerative ability, which brought her back to life, to bring him back as well. She knew it was wrong, as using the flower to resurrect Mikhail would place the same curse that she lived with on him. But she didn't care. She wasn't acting on
She
logic.
did anyway.
She was acting on her own feelings.
That's probably why there's
And
a
so
recurrent
with
theme of
the
flowers,
flower,
because the
Zero
flower is
forged
supposed
a
to
pact. In exchange for his renewed
represent
life,
this
he will be cursed with the flower.
black
Mikhail
flower that's
returns
the
and is
death of
brought
everything,
back.
but it's also
But
the gift of life
reunion
in
is
these
short-lived. While she isn't looking,
flowers keeping her
Brother
alive.
One finally reveals himself
Oh,
and stabs
get
her.
fucked,
Zero's
Zero.
plan completely backfired, as saving Mikhail combined their lives into one. So since Zero is killed, so is Mikhail. In her final moments, she simply just tries to apologize to him.
Does it
But
really end like
regardless,
that? That's
she
fucking
knew
wild.
It was the end for her. She knew that no matter how she felt, whether she was
One
forgiven or saved,
actually outplays the
was
fuck
the
out of
end.
Zero.
And in the end, everything always returns to nothing.
It was always doomed. Damn. I didn't play the game, but that's a good ass ending. What the fuck? Holy shit. Drakengard. Okay.
With the death of Zero and his life goal fulfilled,
Oh, it continues after her death. That's crazy.
Brother One lost all purpose and meaning to his existence.
Yeah, 'cause his
sister's plan
sister's
for him
dead.
was to originally kill himself using his blade, thus putting an end to the flower's influence forever. However, what winds up happening is that Brother One panics. He grieves over the loss of his sister, only wishing to see her again. After catching a glimpse of
Covered in
himself
blood.
inside a nearby mirror, he sees her still
in the world that
alive.
lacks the intoner's
Considering
protection.
they are twins, in this case, they share the same clothes, face, and even body. In his mind, she was still alive. He wanted her to continue living on, and so through him, he intended on doing so. Instead of killing himself, to make sure his sister's memory lived on, he formed the Cult of the Watchers and created an entire religion dedicated to worshipping his sister. The symbol which represented their cult was the three-eyed twins, a combination of one and his sister merged together. In fact, twins would become a very common theme throughout this timeline, but you'll see as time goes on. But anyway, without any of the intoners there to rule the kingdoms and lands they had brought peace to terror
Chaos,
and
yeah.
poverty once again began to plague
It goes
the
back to
continent.
it
More
reverts
ferocious
all of their
monsters
progress they
began
made in
appearing, and Midgard
their
began falling into ruin
society.
once more. A lot of the
Midgard
story
ended up probably
directly
branching
follows
off
the
into
cult
like a bunch of
itself.
warlords.
One of the most important things they discover is what is known as the Seeds of Destruction. They are, once again, one of God's playthings meant to help in the destruction of humanity. Anything that enters the seed will be turned into a horrifying creature hell-bent on ending the world. In order to protect humanity from this danger, the cult designed a security measure known as the seal system. 4 seals.
What the actual fuck? Oh, Drakengard is after 3? Oh, 3 was a prequel. 3 is such a sick-ass story, though. Drakengard 1 is like the ending of Drakengard. 3 is the prequel that sets up the world behind Drakengard 1. Whoa, that's cool. Now I get it.
Were created and scattered throughout the continent. 3 of them reside in
One of
their
the
own
characters
respective
protects the
land,
seal
the
in Drakengard.
desert, forest, and ocean seals respectively, but the 4th seal is embodied by a woman. The goddess seal is a chosen mark which
Hold on. Let me go back a little bit here.
They are, once again, one of God's playthings meant to help in the destruction of humanity. Anything that enters the seed will be turned into a horrifying creature hell-bent on ending the world. In order to protect humanity from this danger, the cult designed a security measure known as the seal system.
The seal
4
system.
seals were created and scattered throughout the continent. 3 of them reside in their own respective land, the desert, forest, and ocean seals respectively, but the 4th seal is embodied by a woman. The goddess seal is a chosen mark which spontaneously appears on a chosen female, and it becomes her job to bear the weight of that responsibility on her own shoulders. Once found by the priests, a sealing ritual will be performed on her, tying the weight of time, space, and dimension to her existence. As a price, the goddess is never allowed to marry or give birth, and on top of all of that, they are in constant pain afflicted by the seal. As a result, most goddesses attempt to commit suicide. We won't spend too much time discussing many of the goddesses, as most of them aren't very important, but there are a few of them which have a lasting impact. The second goddess, for example, was a very controversial one. She was one's former aide, which made her obtaining the status of goddess questionable in the eyes of many. As such, a civil war within the hierarchy of the cult broke out, and one was exiled. A rift then formed within the cult. One was very much like his sister and wanted to help the world in many ways, hence why he locked away the Seed of Destruction. But of course, most of his efforts simply went to remembering her legacy. Now, having been pushed out, the cult formed new ideologies. However, this all stemmed because of one specific reason. A new disease began manifesting within members of the cult. The victims' eyes would turn scarlet red. They became uncontrollable and violent, almost as if possessed by an evil spirit. This became known as the Red Eye disease. In truth, it stemmed from Brother One, more specifically the flower which still lives on within him.
The flower started getting increasingly powerful because he chose to live and not end the flower's influence. And that ended up creating a disease because it started, I guess the flower was trying to expand its...
And so the flower continues to wreak havoc. The Red Eye disease was a byproduct of the flower's existence, and now through it can spread easier and further to others as well. In the beginnings of this,
Logic Virus is the Android equivalent of the Red Eye disease.
Monsters and disease were plaguing their bases and numbers, and so after a bit of regrouping and centralizing within Cathedral City, expanding their land control and replenishing their ranks, they became known as the Empire. But in response to this, hundreds of small provinces which were against them formed a coalition called the Union. Basically, the Empire are the villains, Cult of the Watchers infected by the Red Eye disease, while the Union are the normal and innocent civilians. The story would once again continue with Brother One, particularly his bloodline. You see, after being exiled, One had met a woman named Rosa from the Land of Forest, and they wound up having children together. twins, Gruen and Grant.
Twins,
Despite
Gruen and Grant.
one's expulsion, the
Twins,
two
of
were
course.
still able to join the cult high command, but it's not too important. From this point moving forward, Brother One disappears. We never see him again, and he makes no further appearances in the current timeline that we're following. What
fuck?
happened to him is unknown and left up to the imagination. Anyway, the reason I brought up
Interesting.
One's bloodline is because his kid
If he disappears and no one ever knows what happens to him, he's the original source of the Dark Flowers influence that just stays in the background. Okay, in Drakengard, you're playing a character who's in the Union protecting her sister Furie from the Empire, who are after her because she has a seal. Oh, she's one of the goddesses. That's about all I know so far. What kind of ugly ass child? So, because she ends up being one of the goddesses.
kids would go on to have families of their own and form a whole family tree until we got to our next important character to the story. Brother
But then,
One
because Brother One has a family, doesn't he accidentally expand the influence of the Dark Flower? What kind of ugly ass should have been dead? What the fuck? Cut! It's just blood on her face, and it's blood on her clothes. She killed Zero. We're going into the lore of
One's
Drakengard.
great-great-granddaughter, Mana. You see, Mana's story involves
Mana?
her twin brother Sarai and their mother Ramia. Ramia treated her children
lot of
in
twins.
complete opposite ways. She heaped love upon Sarai but despised and abused Mana. The
Whoa.
reason for this being is they come from a generation of golem sorcerers, and Sarai showed the gift to control these stone guardians, while Mana didn't, so she despised her useless child. One day, she
God
wound
damn.
up taking Mana into the wilderness
Favoritism.
and abandoned her there.
Wanted
In this
her to
moment of
die straight up.
weakness, She was found by the Watchers, who promised to love her as she always wanted. All she had to do was give up her heart and soul to be completely controlled by them, which she did.
She got the red
Watchers
eyes.
were now in control of a vessel which descended directly from a host of
Brother-
the Flower. In
Yeah,
the
yeah.
following months, she is found by the Empire and made their high priestess, and this is
They don't really say that she has part of the flower in her, though. Little girl in red dress with red eyes, Yokotaro theme, yeah.
where the cult's goals truly change. Instead of trying to perpetuate the legacy of one sister and protect the world, now that the Watchers are in charge of and have an army which is infected with their disease, they intend to undo the seals the cult had put in place. The Seed of Destruction was rebranded as the Seed of Resurrection, and they perpetuated the idea that this will save humanity.
They changed it up. They're like, oh, it's not the seed of destruction. It's the seed of resurrection. It'll save humanity, guys. So, all right. Let me get this back. 'Cause this cult now, the Watchers, they're all being influenced by the Flowers' influence. They're an expansion of the Flowers' influence on the world that's trying to destroy itself. And it ends up gaining power and becoming a military and trying to destroy everything, and even rebranding the Seeds of Destruction, another tool of destruction,
The Empire
as a
then locates
seed of
the seal's
resurrection, so
locations,
there
as
creates
well as
incentives.
The goddess, which has now
The voice
fallen
acting is
under
horrible though,
Union
yeah.
territory over time. I haven't really mentioned this, but the whole seal system and the Seed of Destruction story became widely accepted by everyone. It just, over time, the Empire decided to go against it. And so, the Empire readied their armies to launch a full-blown assault to destroy humanity. While this is where the first Drakengard starts, there's still a little bit of backstory I need to cover regarding our new group of main characters. Kaim, Furiai, and Inuart are our three
I'm
new
invested.
primary
This is
characters,
cool.
and fortunately their stories are all connected.
We haven't
to
even
each
gotten to
other.
the Nier yet,
You
but it's
see,
just sick.
Kaim and Furiai are the children of King Gap, the 8th king of Carleon, a small eastern kingdom part of the Union. Gap came from a lineage of advanced swordsmen, whose teachings have been passed down for generations. He was well respected amongst damn near everyone for his charisma and fierce tactics on the battlefield. He often didn't need to wage war, as the land they were on was capable of supporting his people and he didn't want to put them at risk, but when he did, his charisma often caused his enemies to defect to his side. One former enemy was Ypres, Inuart's father, who in modern day Gap trusts as a true friend. Gap was always aware of the Empire's growing influence, however hesitated to start a war with them due to their overwhelming numbers. Instead, what he spent his time doing was training Kaim to be his successor. He taught him, as well as Inuart, the family swordsmanship. Kaim picked it up very naturally and took a lot of pride in his strength, while Inuart struggled to keep up during the lessons. As Kaim grew stronger and stronger each day with his skills sharpening more and more, Inuart failed to keep the same pace. In fact, he was trying too hard to be just like Kaim. He wound up finding himself to be much more attuned to that of the harp and music. He was much more poetic than he was a brute, and so found success in this aspect of his life. But still striving to be strong so he could protect the love of his life, Footy Eye. Footy Eye I haven't really been talking about because at this point in her life, she doesn't have too much going on. Being the younger sister of Kaim, the two had a very close relationship, as you'd expect most siblings would. Kaim thought his little sister was adorable, however, she had deeper feelings. I feel like it's important to mention that all of—
His sister had deeper feelings for him. Kaim thought she was cute, but she wanted to fuck him. Yeah, that's right.
of the main characters of Drakengard 1 have a pretty nasty trait about them one way or the other.
Typical
so expect
anime
things
plot.
to take a turn with everyone eventually. Footy Eye has an incestual love for her brother. While he never reciprocated those emotions back to her, fortunately, Kaim wouldn't have to, because since Inuart's father was so close to King Gap, Inuart spent a lot of time around the two siblings. The three were really close, and before anyone knew it, Footy Eye and Inuart caught feelings for each other. She loved his harp playing and always badgered him to play it. It wasn't too long before the two became engaged. However, despite this, Footy Eye still holds strong feelings towards her brother. There was a calming harmony amongst everything happening at this time. There was some slight drama, but things were simple. However, things changed on
That's why I'm not sure Drakengard can get remade today. No one paid attention to the game 20 years. It's pretty deranged. Yeah, Drakengard is pretty fucking deranged. Like, Drakengard 3 was, like, so far, like, out of all the lore we've listened to just now, holy shit, it's demented. It would have to be a mature game. It would probably be best left in the stories, like the mangas or comics that it was in, or, you know, like these novellas. There's no way. At Drakengard 1, we're really getting into
black
it.
Dragons
Age 30 plus.
Empire attacked their kingdom and slaughtered the royal family.
Son.
Both Kaim and his sister
I low-key though,
to the death
I low-key would hope, I honestly low-key wish, though anyway, Yoko Taro would be able to release a mature game like that. It would just be sick. It would be, I kind of dig like really dark stories because they can get fucked up. As long as there's purpose to it, though. It's gotta have purpose. There's gotta be purpose to the darkness of a story.
The kingdom of Carleon was without its leaders, and it wasn't too long before the country fully collapsed. In many stories, an event like this would be the deepest valley of darkness in which our characters must rise out from. However, this was only the beginning of even worse things to come.
Your answer, a pact or death.
1 year after the tragedy, Kaim, Footy Eye, and Inuart had fled the country. The mark of the goddess had appeared on a 14-year-old Footy Eye at the time, and she became the goddess seal. Accepting this fate meant that she had to give up everything. She was to be locked away in isolation for protection, never able to see her brother again or get married to her betrothed. But there was nothing she could do. The seal is not accepted by choice. Whether she liked it or not, she was the new goddess. Her life was now void of any joy she had hoped to have. She was placed in the care of Vertile, the hierarch of the Union Church. It was his job to overlook the goddesses and ensure their protection. He's not too bad and is dedicated to his job and feels much sympathy for her, as he can tell that she's much too empty for someone of her age. To be fair, her worries weren't as extreme as she feared. Both Kaim and Inuart could stop by and see her on occasion, and Inuart would play the harp for everyone. However, the joy that it used to bring never quite was the same. Kaim's condition, however, wasn't much better. The past him lived a relatively happy life full of dreams. He was surrounded by his strict yet caring father, his kind mother, and his lovely young sister. He trained with Inuart, who was supposed to become his brother-in-law, and when he was old enough, he was to succeed his father in governance of the kingdom. But after the Black Dragon attacked, he was left with nothing. He closed off his heart and filled it with anger. Now revenge is the only thing driving.
He became another kind of.
He strives for daily
He's
combat
9S.
so he can
He's the original 9S.
kill his opponents with ruthless aggression, and joining the Union and fighting against the Empire,
Yeah,
the
they're
exact
freaky.
people responsible for his anger, was the perfect outlet for murder. And that is Kaim's sin. He does not care for revenge or justice.
He's
He
a
is
sadist.
simply angry, out for blood, and looking to kill. As for Inuart,
Just looking to
his
kill,
dreams
yeah.
were also lost.
Yoko
Once
Taro's
Furi
very
became
much
the
he has a fascination for like those just angry characters that just want to lash out and just keep killing things, right?
goddess, the two
Seems there's
were
a
no
recurring theme
longer
of these
able to be
characters.
together. His heart playing
Zero,
wasn't enough to put anyone in a
Kaim,
good mood anymore.
Kaine,
Everyone was
Kaim,
left empty in a future they wish they could have changed. In the following years, Inuart joined the Union Army, and thanks to his sword practice he had with Kaim, he was very useful in this environment. But the woman he loved the most, he could never be with. And 6 years later,
Yeah.
as the emptiness has swelled within each of our characters respectively, we reach the start of Drakengard 1.
Fuck. That's where it starts. Jesus.
Drakengard's story opens with the Empire initiating their plan to destroy the seals and attacking the castle protecting Furiai. Kaim, alongside Union soldiers, are fighting against the Red-Eyed forces. Kaim particularly is slashing his way through them with terrifying ease, using his insatiable hatred to drive him forward. But despite his fiery
Drakengard
will
1
to kill
starring-
every adversary that stands in his way, his time comes much sooner than he had expected. He is struck in the back by a nearby soldier and gravely wounded. Recognizing he's now on death's doorstep, he retreats back into the castle to see Furiai once more before he dies. But on his path, he comes face to face with Angelus, the Red Dragon. She too has seen better days and is similarly
Angelus,
on
the Red
her
Dragon?
deathbed as well. While Kaim continues to despise dragons for the death of his parents, he is more motivated to continue on living. So, to save both of their lives, he decides to form a pact with the dragon. If you recall, during Drakengard 3, pacts weren't often used. Pacts are a contract between human and beast in which the human gains some kind of supernatural power, but must pay some price. In most cases,
None of this explained early on in Drakengard 1. It just happens weird out of nowhere. But I guess like they later on added all these explanations for everything, huh?
is
Just to
that
add more
which the
context.
human holds most dear. On top of this, pact partners' lives become one. If either of them is fatally
Sounds good.
injured, it means death for both. Kaim resorted to forming a pact with the species he despised the most, but it was the only option for both of them. Kaim and Angelus are both healed, and the price for this pact was Kaim's voice.
Can I
He
get
is
your
no
Masubi?
longer able to speak, but fortunately, he is able to communicate with Angelus telepathically. With his newfound strength, he proceeds further into the castle where he is greeted by his sister and
Angelus,
Inuart.
huh?
With a
Remember
war
that dragon,
raging
by
across
the
the
way.
land
The
and
red
an
dragon,
army
Angelus?
right at their
Angelus?
doorstep, the three find it safest to take refuge in an elven village which has taken no sides in this battle. However, upon their arrival, all of its people
Look at this
have been
OG
slaughtered by
gameplay.
the Empire. Angelus then hears the voice of Vertile, as he too had formed a pact with a beast in history's past. Being the guardian of the seals, Inuart and Furiai find it the safest to join his company. Kaim and Angelus, however, choose to stay and investigate further. What they find are ominous connections between the cult and Empire, which the Union just doesn't know about. When a villager approaches him begging to
OG-ass
save
fucking
the people of his
gameplay.
village, Kaim kicks the man in the face, before heading in that direction, not to save the lives of the innocent, but to take the lives of the Empire. The direction he was headed was to the Valley of Fairies, where our next party member is located, Leonard. Leonard is a kind-hearted and righteous man who detests the horrors of war, Both of his parents were killed in the battle between the Empire and the Union and was thus left to raise his 3 younger brothers all by himself. However, like Kaim, Furiai, and many others in the story we've still yet to meet, Leonard isn't without his wicked nature. He is, in the simplest of terms, a pedophile. He is attracted to
no. Oh my god, no. Holy shit. Bro, it's like Yoko Taro gets every fucking evil trait of human beings and puts him in at least one character.
Children and
Holy
shamefully pleasures
shit.
himself to them, while he, to a certain extent, recognizes the deplorable actions he indulges himself in. He struggles internally with this, as he also believes he should be proud of his sexual preferences. Regardless, he punished himself by becoming a hermit living deep inside the Valley of Fairies with his younger brothers. His sexual urges still do get the best of him on occasion, and so he'll leave the house to masturbate in the forest. On one such occasion, while he was out, the Empire arrived at his home and massacred.
All right. You know what? You guys are right, bro. There's a reason why these games aren't being remade or remastered. It's too dark. It's too fucked. People would be like, what the actual fuck? You would get canceled just for buying the game if it ever even became something that is real. Yoko Taro is a warped mind. Yoko Taro is the kind of person that stares into the void.
His family. He arrived
That's
at
all
the
I can
corpses
say.
of those he loved most.
He's
thought
definitely
he
somebody
should
who
have been
stares
the
into
one
the
to
void.
die, as he was the true sinner deserving of death. Filled with self-guilt, he tries to take his own life, but fails. A nearby fairy then takes advantage of Leonard's grief and forges a pact with him. I didn't mention this prior, but the monster in a pact will often gain strength through negative emotion. So monsters will often seek those in an extreme heightened state.
The boy
of
stared at
sadness
Yoko Taro
or
and he
trauma.
stared back.
The
Sounds
price
right.
for Leonard's pact was his eyes. Kaim senses a pact partner nearby and arrives at the location where the two meet. Leonard inevitably decides to join Kaim, as perhaps dying for a greater cause could absolve him of his sins. Kaim then loses contact with Vertile, whom he had entrusted Furiai and Inuart to, and so, concerned for their safety, the group make their way to the desert. When he arrives, he is greeted by his sister, who is fortunately safe, but alone. It turns out Inuart and Vertile had been captured by the Empire and taken to a dungeon, and so Kaim and the others fly off once more to rescue them.
Vertile.
However, unfortunately for Inuart, his feelings are turned against him. When it comes to Inuart's greatest sin, deep down within, he has always harbored jealousy towards Kaim, since Furiai is meant to be his betrothed. But she loves her brother. And on top of that, Kaim is always the better swordsman, so Inuart wants to be the
He's
best
envious,
so he can protect
envious.
Furiai. He is tormented and brainwashed by Mana, as his insecurities and obsessive love for Furiai
Mana.
are turned against him, and he swears allegiance to the Empire. In the meantime,
He
Kaim
gets
and
turned-
Leonard arrive at the
gets
Imperial
converted.
dungeon, where only Vertile resides. After burning every soldier alive in sight, all of the prisoners, including Vertile, escape. He has since learnt that the Empire's goal is to summon the Seeds of Resurrection, and so urges Kaim to defend the seals to the best of his ability. Unfortunately, the desert seal has already been broken by the time they arrive. Instead, what they find is our next main character, Ariosh. Before the Empire, Ariosh was an ordinary, beautiful housewife living in the village of Niflheim.
Beautiful
But like
housewife,
most,
huh?
she suffered loss
Niflheim?
when the Imperial army arrived and slaughtered her husband
Beautiful
and
housewife.
son.
Nice.
Such tragedy wrought havoc on both her heart and mind.
course it did.
Madness dwells in her eyes, and she bursts into sudden laughter during the middle of her screams as if she were remembering something. Her insanity brought her to develop a twisted sense of protection. She would both murder and devour young children. In her mind, she thought that by doing so, she could protect them within her womb. After numerous bloody incidents like this occur,
It's almost like I keep thinking, all right, these are the dark ideas he's come up with, and he just brings another one out. She eats them and devours them to keep them safe in her womb. Literal children. What the actual fuck? Yep. What the shit? Dude. God. Damn, I thought the 5 and the disciple of 5 was a fucked up story.
She was eventually
It's just a
taken
nice
in by
intro
the
to the
Imperial
series,
Army
huh?
and thrown in jail. That was until Kaim arrived and broke everyone out. But unlike Vertile, who escaped unharmed, Ariosh was greatly injured in the prison's destruction. On the brink of death, the spirits of Undine and Salamander approached her to form
Undine
a
and Salamander?
pact.
What
Like the
fuck?
others, she too possesses strong negative emotions they can use to become more powerful, and so with no other choice, she accepted to save her own life. The price was...
When the machines started eating the androids in the resistance camp in Automata, it feels extreme. The people who know Drakengard are sort of numb to that stuff already. It's like, yeah, the people who know all the Drakengard stuff, like, yeah, that seems right. Seems very right.
Like last time, the group senses a pact partner nearby and
Holy
runs into her.
shit,
Their first
dude.
interaction is certainly an odd one, as she tries to eat Kaim alive as there are no children around. But Vertile restrains her and
Yeah,
chooses to bring her
very
along
tame
for her
comparison.
safety and the safety of others.
Very tame.
Everyone eventually regroups with Furiai to discuss their next plan of action, but during this time, Inuart appears with newfound power. Having been corrupted by the Empire in an effort to attain strength to become more powerful than Kaim, Inuart had formed a pact with the Black Dragon. The
Black
same
Dragon?
Black Dragon that killed Kaim's parents and is the source of all of his anger and torment. The price for Inuart's pact was his musical talents. With this strength, he can now protect Furiai like he's always wanted,
Yo, that's
whether she
fucked
likes
up.
it or not. Sensing something is not right with his friend, Kaim stands against him. His instinct...
You know, it's it's kind of sad, right? Like, the Drakengard story is very twisted and demented, but clearly got some good fucking plot twist. But look at the gameplay. That should look like a 1995 fucking, like, OG...
would prove to be correct, as the two then clash.
Windows
in a battle
runs
with
on
their
Windows
blades.
95.
The two
Requires
dragons
at
both fight
least
each other as well, and when Kaim is knocked to the
fucking
ground, he recognizes the Black
200
Dragon. All of the
128
anger he has
megabytes
gathered
of
in the
RAM and
6 years
shit, you know?
since well up, and he is ready
Which
to
is a
take
lot
it
at the
all
time.
out.
I think it
But
wasn't too
before
much,
he gets
actually.
the chance, the dragon blasts both he and Angelus with fire, heavily wounding both of them. Unable to move, they are forced to watch Inuart take Furiai by force as he flies away.
Takes his
With
girl,
that,
dude.
The Empire
Like my
is
girl
now
now.
in possession of the Goddess Seal.
It doesn't look like a 2003 game. To be fair, at the time, 2003, depending on the budget, a
After a few
2003 game
days
could
of rest
definitely look like
and
a
recovery,
late
Kaim
1980s
is ready
game.
once more to save his sister. On the path
know?
towards the Empire territory,
Depends.
we meet Mana's twin brother, Sarai. I've already briefly covered the two's backstory, so there's not too much new information. I've talked about how their mother only loved Sarai as he inherited the ability to control Stone Guardians,
Yeah.
but mostly left it at that. While Sarai did love his mother as she treated him well, as the story goes, the Empire wound up slaughtering many people during their tirade, and Sarai's mother was one of them.
Oh,
In her
damn.
dying
Okay,
moments, she
outplayed.
forced her child to form a pact with a golem to save his life. Originally, these monsters are non-sentient and unthinking tools meant to be manipulated by stone sorcerers such as them. But his mother's dying wish gifted this particular golem with sorrow. The price Sarai was forced to pay was his time, his ability to age. Fortunately, his mother's actions worked, and he was the only surviving member of their village. Being the only loved child, over time Sarai felt guilty for consuming his mother's affection and so sought to make amends. He was hoping Mana was still near where their mother last left her and so went out to try and find her. And this is where Kaim and his group come in and cross paths with him. While everyone agrees to try and help, no trace of Mana remains, unbeknownst
Sarai.
that she is now the Empire's High Priestess. Anyway, eventually
Sarai
all
ends up being
seals
another
get
party.
broken, excluding Furiai. And so, in a last-ditch effort to prevent the apocalypse, both the Union and Empire's armies meet on the battlefield in front of the Empire's
But they already
gates.
have the
An all-out war
Furiai
commences
seal.
with
Why wouldn't
new
they just break
monstrous
it if they already had
Cyclopses
her?
appearing and causing utter mayhem. Eventually, however, the Union emerges victorious as all of the enemies are slain. But just when they thought it was over, Fireballs from a floating fortress demolish
A
the battlefield,
floating
and the
fortress.
Union's army is also lost.
God
Fearing for
damn,
the
they got
safety
straight
of Footy-Eye
nuked.
more than ever, the group then make their way into the fortress, where instead of finding
Hold
the
on.
goddess,
Did you
they
see that?
run
The
into
fortress
Mana.
looked like the. It had like those
She's so
those
much
structures
different from the
that
girl
kind of look
Sarah
like
used
the
to know, he
Automata
almost
ones.
doesn't recognize her. Seeing the state that she's in, he begs her to notice him and return to how she used to be, but to no
Trying to bring
avail.
Mana back, huh?
Recognizing that both her mind and humanity is gone, and she is merely a puppet being used by the Watchers, Sarai has Golem put her out of her misery. But without Mana, the floating fortress is unable to stay in the sky, as
She was
the
powering a
one
floating
magically
fortress.
keeping it afloat. Having to look out for themselves, Kaim and the others barely
the
managed to
actual
escape
fuck?
with their lives.
Bro, this
but
is not what I
inside
thought
were
this game was
still
gonna
the
be.
likes of Footy-Eye and Inuar.
At all.
Their story comes to an abrupt end, as being inside the fortress when it crashes, both of their lives are lost. In an indirect way, Kaim does get his revenge on the Black Dragon, as being pact partners with Inuart now, since he died, so did the dragon. With the last
Wait,
seal
does
having
Footy-Eye
fallen with
actually
Footy-Eye,
die
the
also?
world's destruction can commence, and the Watchers can
All the seeds of
invade
destruction.
their world. While they can take on many forms, this time around
The
they
babies.
appear as giant flying babies. Kaim
What the fuck, bro? We're not even to the weird endings. What the actual
attempts
shit?
to kill as many of them as he can,
gotta-
but they keep
You
coming.
gotta listen to this.
As
This
for the
is-
likes of Vertile, he is horrified as to what he is witnessing. For a man who has dedicated his entire life to religion, what god could he pray to now?
All has
attempts
become-
to escape,
we had to
let
send it
alone
to hell.
survive, seem impossible at this point, as they are soon cornered.
What the
Ariosh is separated from the group, as the sight of so many babies excites her beyond her wildest imaginations.
Oh,
Almost as if
no.
they knew her tendencies, she is swarmed and devoured herself.
By the
As for
babies.
Leonard,
Oh
he has
my
chosen to
god.
try and redeem himself. His entire life, he's been nothing but a coward, unable to do what he knew was the right thing.
Yeah, the
And so for
pedophile
the
will
first
come to
and
rescue.
last time,
Okay.
He uses his pack partner's
Against
magic
babies.
and self-destructs in a massive
I
explosion.
I
But
cannot.
while an
dude.
opening for
I
them to
can
continue
actually
has been made,
not.
an even greater Watcher has appeared. She is known as the Queen Beast and is able to both summon other Watchers, but can also warp time itself.
Oh wait. But these seeds of destruction are basically the also the flower, right? And the dragon should be able to destroy them. They have a dragon. Kaim has a dragon. The black dragon died, I think. Didn't Birdley had a dragon or something like that? Hold on.
Simply being
Or am I
there,
tripping?
she is eroding time and reality. Her stomach is swelling due to
Like, remember
how
her,
much
the
she
Queen
is
Beast?
consuming and tearing apart. And
Okay.
so Kaim and Angelus decide that if they're going to go out, it might as well be in a blaze of glory.
This is where I was like, I can't take this seriously.
They leave behind Sarai, hoping that he can live in a future that they won't be able to see. And so the two plunge down and pierce the heart of the beast, resulting in a flash of white light engulfing them all. A chasm then splits through time and space, and the three of them are sent to a new universe. 2003 modern Tokyo.
What the fuck? They travel from wait, what year does Dragon what? They folded time and space. They fucked it up by fighting this giant baby. This huge monster. And then they're like, let's go to modern Tokyo. Fuck it. 2003. At the time it was modern Tokyo. I'm assuming that was around the time this game came out, right? That's why we skipped this detail.
In the same vein that the universe we were
boss
living in
baby.
during Drakengard
true
is
bit.
exactly like ours up until 865, in this parallel universe, the world was exactly the same as ours, only up until the year 2003. While Kaim and Angelus are flustered as to where they've wound up,
We just tell people that for some reason there's this weird particle named Meso. Oh, I see. Because it kind of skips a lot of this other weird shit that happened, basically, right? Because the particle is it's an alternate universe. It's an alternate universe. Okay.
up, the queen still lives, and so deal with that.
It's not
first.
Tokyo in our universe. It's just so they just, what, is it like a temporary, they temporarily go to an alternate universe and then we come back to the original universe in the same timeline?
After a fearsome battle, the Queen Beast
Or
falls and disintegrates,
Beast.
dispersing its particles all over Japan. Unfortunately, the victory of Kaim and Angelus would be short-lived, as the Japanese Air Force then shoot the two down, killing them. Angelus's body would get impaled upon the Tokyo Tower and eventually taken in for research.
Angelus, the red dragon, right? Gets fucked. Wait, what about Kaim? He just got blown up by a missile? Kaim just casually gets sent to an alternate dimensions, our protagonist, our murderous protagonist, and just gets blown up by a missile.
As for Kaim,
at the beginning of Nier, in the Japanese version only, you see the Tokyo Tower.
He was never referenced again after being shot down.
Oh,
Some
really?
like to believe he survived and would go on to participate in this next arc of the story, but considering their lives were entwined from their pact, most canonically it is assumed that he died and his corpse is never mentioned. As for what happened to the Drakengard universe,
at the beginning of
no
Nier,
one knows.
at the end of the prologue.
But this is how the bridge between Drakengard and Nier is formed. I cannot stress more the importance the bodies of Angelus and the Queen Beast are going to present, as they are the source of everything that is about to happen.
The Queen Beast? Nier Replicant, what the fuck? Hold on.
June 12th, 2003 is the day this world changed forever. You'd imagine the shock that befell the nation of Japan when an
So, it just time skipped and universe skipped, parallel universe skipped into modern Japan with the Queen Beast and Angelus the Red Dragon and Kaim also technically.
unidentified giant
In the midst of their universe-ending battle, fought hard enough to create this entire fucking
as well as
event.
a dragon appeared in the middle of Shinjuku.
That's what happened at the
leading
end
to
of
the
Dragon
death
Guard,
of
the ending.
56, with hundreds injured and hundreds of millions of
Holy
yen
shit,
worth
just
of
a
damages
giant-
incurred. While
just
both
a
threats
giant
were neutralized,
watcher.
it was a much too large scale of an incident to simply sweep under the rug. A gag order was established to attempt and prevent all media, news,
Good
or
luck.
internet coverage of what happened to spread, but of course it did.
Remember the tree story about the Red Dragon? Yeah. The warrior and the Red Dragon.
Soon, the entire world began theorizing as to what this event possibly was.
Can you imagine?
Other nations mostly believed it was an act of terrorism by some unknown organization and began planning accordingly, as they always do. But for
It was like the 9/11 of Japan. Wait, what year was this? 2003, right? Oh, that would make kind of sense. Maybe some 9/11 inspiration. Too soon? 2 years later. Shit. The game, yeah.
for the most part,
It would be like a 9/11 for Japan, right? Like
it was
I feel like that's part of the inspiration
just
there.
chaos and confusion left in the wake of this incident. As stated, the situation largely resolved itself. The giant was
Because
defeated.
I'd imagine Yoko Taro at the time, he's getting inspiration by the things he sees around him, right? You told me he clearly kept up with world politics if you were telling me he got inspiration from the Gulf War. He had to have gotten inspiration from 9/11. Absolutely. This has to be inspired by 9/11.
and dispersed, leaving little, if any, traces left behind of its physical existence, while Angelus the Red Dragon was shot down, impaled upon Tokyo Tower, and subsequently taken in for research in a top-secret location by the Japanese government. But a mere 6 months
researched
after the
dragon.
incident, a new disease began emerging. Residents within Tokyo, the location where the 612 incident took place,
612.
began turning into
They even called it 612. Come on, 9/11, 612. It's a parallel. It's a parallel of 9/11 and the real world events. He adds these ideas into the stories.
salt.
That's
Their
cool.
entire
Wait, hold on. What? Took place? Began turning salt?
body changed colors, solidified, and people simply turned into statues of pure salt. The mortality rate was 100%. Due to the nature
Oh,
in which
like the
everything
story, the
appears,
Gestalt thing,
the
right?
disease was dubbed white chlorination syndrome. And it wasn't
Oh, white chlorination syndrome. Yeah, because they're turning into salt. Oh.
Too long after cases like this began appearing that a rush to find a cure started as well. But as the numbers of infected patients began
That's what Yona has in the prologue. She has the white chlorination system, and that's just based off what happened here in this event, is that Queen Beast from a parallel universe.
rising, doctors began seeing an alternate response. Some of the infected
she's coughing, yeah.
became hyper-aggressive and violent.
All
They
the
don't
outsiders.
turn into statues of salt, but their mental state is reduced to that of a savage. It was almost exactly the same as the red-eye disease, and that's because it was. A mutation of it you can consider. As you might expect, white chlorination syndrome was not as simple as people's immune systems reacting negatively to a foreign object. Rather, it was much more complicated. Yes, the disease was stemming from the Queen Beast, but the reaction those infected were having wasn't a coincidence. What was truly happening here is that due to the Queen's origin as a watcher and servant of God trying to destroy the world, the Maso, the magical element that's present within these creatures, is spreading and getting into the systems of these humans. The humans infected would be presented with a pact. They can either accept the pact and serve God in his goal to destroy humanity, becoming nothing more than a mindless savage, or reject it and die. It's evident which people took which option.
Yeah. So I get it. It's if they become part of the Watchers in a way, and they either accept it and become the destruction itself, or they don't and they just die.
Many aren't so willing to simply give up their lives, and so they became servants of God. The Japanese government was quick to pinpoint where exactly all of this was stemming from, not that it was hard to figure out, and so planned to cordon off Shinjuku. This was initially a very questionable decision by the larger public as a whole due to humanitarian reasons. That was until a key figure was killed by one of these berserked individuals. After that, everyone approved of sealing off the city. An immense wall dubbed the Wall of Jericho was erected, and they were officially sealed off from the rest of the world. A few members of media stayed behind to continue covering the event from within, however, it didn't take long, in fact mere days after its construction, until all transmissions ceased. The last thing they saw was a giant white creature appearing. Just like that, the outside world lost all insight into what was happening within the walls, and so had to simply observe the situation from a distance. Over the next 4 years, they would continuously keep a close eye on anything they could. An inexplicable dark spot appeared in a satellite photograph, but it is for some reason disregarded as not important. One of the more immediate threats the Japanese government had to repel was the attack they underwent when some group attempted to obtain Angelus's corpse. This entire time, they've been experimenting on it in their labs, learning all they can, so it's understandably an item of interest for many people. But
is that how they end up making Vice and Noir and all that, and even experimenting on Emil based on Angelus's corpse because he was a dragon full of magic? That's how they reintroduced magic into the world.
The Japanese forces successfully repel this raid and keep the dragon's corpse safe for now. One of the other observations they made during this time was the dwindling number of berserked individuals. Over the years, they began making less and less noise and weren't as prominent of a threat as when things started. But this wasn't by coincidence, and to the dismay of the entire world, it wouldn't be for good reasons either. They were becoming smarter and more dangerous than they ever were. The white figure that was last seen before all media coverage stopped entirely was now the form the infected took. They were no longer just raging humans, they were becoming a
being who exists
unit,
to control the Legion and end humanity.
Being led. These white beings would become known as the Legion, and their leader is someone aptly named Red-Eye. We never truly know who Red-Eye is,
the Borg.
as he's only ever referred to by
the Borg? Red-Eye. Yeah, because it's the Red-Eye, it's all the same shit from the original universe.
By that name. Fans love to theorize that it's actually Kime, as we're never updated on what happened to his body.
Oh, that would be sick. An equivalent idea from Star Trek. I don't know too much about Star Trek, if I'm being honest. I feel like you're probably right, though. A
after
collective,
being
yeah.
shot down.
Kinda like a
But
hive
nothing
mind
ever
sort of thing going
suggests
on.
that that's the truth and is 100% a theory. Either way, under his leadership, the Legion is a major threat to the military, and in 2008, the Wall of Jericho is destroyed from the inside. Red Eye and the Legion launch a full
So at this point in this overarching timeline, the presence and influence and the looming threat of total destruction of the Black Flower is pretty much never gonna go away because of Brother One and his actions and not sacrificing himself, leading to him creating a family, expanding the influence, creating these red eye disease. That also, in this stuff right now is in between Dragon 1 and Nier.
full-on assault, killing everyone they can.
Yeah.
The moment the wall fell sounds like the ones heard during the 612 incident echo once again.
And then they actually broke down the
Counter-assaults
wall.
are launched against the Legion, however, due to their unforeseen organization and natural resistance to weapons used on them, they are incredibly difficult to halt. Of course, due to the location of where this is all stemming from, regions within Japan bear the brunt of the chaos.
It makes sense that only they would have to use the dragon's power to destroy Legion in this case, or anything that's affected by the white chlorination syndrome, because the dragons were the only things originally made to be able to destroy anything that stems from the Black Flower.
Casualties increase, white chlorination syndrome continues
had to fight an
spread
army.
once
Yeah,
more, thus
yeah. With
increasing
red
the
eyes.
Legion numbers, and several countries around the world bar any refugees seeking safety as they don't want the infection to spread. Because of this, in 2009, Japan began feeling very vulnerable from a military defense standpoint, and so formed an alliance with the United States. In exchange
yeah,
for their
dude, freedom.
assistance, Legion corpses and captives are sent to America for study in military research, while the US Army arrives in Japan to help
about
repel
right.
Legion attacks. Fortunately, things seem to work. Over the next few months, the Legion is pushed back. However, an endless flow of forces only seem to continue pouring out from within the walls of Shinjuku. The area is carpet bombed, however, it hardly affected Legion numbers.
Yeah,
Considering
hadn't
this is where the source of all the Legion is stemming from, the nuclear option is considered. And a mere 4 months later, in hopes to rout out the growing Legion at the source, an atomic bomb is dropped on Shinjuku.
The
Any
third
remaining
atomic bomb
areas
ever
that
dropped.
contained dense Legion activity were also hit with nuclear weapons. The majority of Japan was devastated from these bombings. However,
No shit.
initially it appears to have been a success. In the following months, all traces of Legion activity in the country appeared eradicated. And while yes, no members of the Legion appeared for some time after this, in truth,
basically.
they weren't gone, and neither
Yeah.
was the threat of white chlorination syndrome.
Yeah.
In fact, nuking Shinjuku was quite possibly the worst thing they
Yeah, because the only thing that can destroy those particles is the dragon, like the power of the dragon's magic. They just actually spread it further by pushing it everywhere.
could have done. While the physical forces that made up the Legion disappeared, the element within them that was causing it to happen in the first place, the Maso, didn't. The nuclear attacks only served to spread
just
this element
spread
and
it,
blast
yeah.
it
Oh
across
my
the globe.
God,
And by the time the
bro,
research they had
across the
conducted uncovered
globe.
this, it was already too
That's
late.
why it's like
They-
snowing in the beginning of the game, because of all these events. It's just been spreading everywhere. It got into the overall. It's like dust that just spread across the planet.
Did learn a lot about Maso, however, particularly that it proved the existence of a parallel universe. They called it the multiple origin theory, which stated that another world exists in a parallel universe from the one they're currently in. So, the Maso that has been the source of this infection is not native to their world and should not exist in their universe in the first place. They learn how it's transmitted, such as through bodily fluids and waste. Coughing and saliva can also transmit it, but also there's no physical means to destroy it, such as heat from explosives or nuclear weapons. Basically, all of mankind was now susceptible to being infected and they had no idea how to stop it.
'Cause they
And to
didn't have
top things
magic.
off, less than a year after thinking they nuked all of the Legion out of existence, they re-emerged, as did their leader, Red Eye.
They ended up having to deal with the side effects of the parallel universe almost being completely obliterated from the Watchers. It staved off the overall obliteration of the universe, but it just kind of pushed it back further.
It now became a race against the clock, not only to find a cure, but to simultaneously
actually sick.
fight a war. Also, just to add on top of the bad situations, the dragon's body was also stolen the following year. An unknown armed party raided the classified facility that was conducting the research
Stole the
and
dragon.
had taken its remains. Rumors believe it could have been some kind of religious cult or possibly the United States. However, no one stepped
CIA.
forward to claim responsibility.
The CIA
so it
is
remains
like our
unknown
dragon
who
now.
it was, and no further information is given past this. So Angelus's body disappears, but a fair amount of research had been conducted on it by this point, so it's not all lost. For this next portion, I'm actually going to isolate these upcoming stories into their own segments, as I believe it'll be easier to follow that way instead of bouncing back and forth. There's
Okay.
two main branches and plot lines that begin to happen at this point. There's the story that went
This
on
stolen
trying
body
to
could be
cure
a door to
white
follow
clonation
up on
syndrome,
here.
and the story of fighting against Red Eye and the Legion. For
Yeah,
this portion,
maybe.
I'm going to start off focusing on the
That'd be
Legion
sick,
and
actually.
the war that went on with them, as it's a tad shorter. I should preface everything by mentioning both stories begin utilizing Maso to create what they dub as magic. They discover this magic element and are able to absorb energy from other worlds and use it in their own, thus breaking the law of conservation of mass by creating something from nothing. So be aware that magic is becoming a thing. So, one of the most dangerous things that comes with fighting against the Legion head-on are the soldiers getting infected with white chlorination syndrome. Being on a battlefield and in close proximity
yes.
to creatures who can infect you
Nice,
like
nice.
any airborne sickness
So kind.
is tricky to circumvent.
Appreciate
So,
you.
in 2016, a medical compound called luciferase was developed, which greatly slowed its onset effects. It didn't cure them, but it slowed it down. As such, soldiers administered with luciferase were less at risk and more able to directly combat the Legion without fear. These treated soldiers formed the 1st Crusade Squadron and successfully take a couple battles in their favor. However,
yeah, this
are
guy does an amazing. Honestly, he's really good at everything he gathered up, and he like found a very because I can understand it the first time he says it. That he did a really good job with this video. Like I'm catching on. I'm like, oh, I can see all the dots connecting as he says it. He did a really good job. I'm gonna get a little bit of sauce though. I'm gonna get a little bit of sauce, okay? Give me a second. I completely skipped the story when players playing Nier because the story about the Legion is just the background for the fight against WCS, which is what Nier is about. I got you.
Ultimately defeated.
Yeah, it's just
Further
it's just a little
research
background
uncovers
behind the white
luciferase to be
Carnation
more
system.
effective on younger patients. So
Because
children and
the Legion just served as a tool of explaining how white chlorination syndrome actually became very widespread, rather than it being localized and quarantined. Like
teenagers who show exemplary physical ability are administered treatment and urged into joining combat squads. The Hamlin organization is formed to train these young soldiers to fight the Legion. These soldiers were known as Crusaders. While the Hamlin organization's methods were questionable, abducting orphans and coercing them into service due to their physical capability and receptiveness to luciferase.
Look, man, I'm telling you, this guy, Yoko Taro, he keeps up with a lot of world politics. This is like the kind of shit that would happen in actual, like, wars.
It worked. These Crusaders began to expand to an international level and brought the war to a standstill. But not everyone agreed or even trusted the Hamlin organization to serve as the sole solution, specifically Japan. Project Snow White was created by them in hopes to invent a weapon they could use without relying on foreign aid. But they weren't just normal weapons, they wanted magic weapons. By studying the weaponization of Maso, they were hoping they could create the ultimate weapon to defend Japan against the Legion. However, like the Hamlin organization, children were the primary test subjects. It wasn't a gun or any form of artillery they were looking to create, it was a living being they were hoping to enhance via magic. A classified secret lab known as the National Weapons Laboratory was created and disguised underneath a mansion in secret to not draw any suspicion. It was here that various children were tested on with Maso. Two of the children present are very relevant to this timeline, Emil and his sister Halua. They weren't the first children to be tested on, but they would be the most important. Halua was Emil's older sister and was designated experiment number 6, while Emil was number 7. To be fair, the facility they were being held at didn't treat them like prisoners per se. More so, it was moonlighting as an orphanage in the face of these children, albeit not a very good one. There were a bunch of kids that used to be around, but only those with aptitude for becoming experimental weapons were chosen. Halua and Emil were two of the most promising. And in the story,
they were eventually made as weapons to fight the Legion.
Things from Halua's point of view. The orphanage, as she perceived it, wasn't a very comforting environment. She and the other children
also, brother who was hired to write letters to other children,
both physical and mental, which she perceived as some sort of school lesson. Everyone in the facility spoke Japanese, which was not their native language, so for a short time they were taught how to roughly speak a new language. The two siblings had been in the facility for a few years by this point, and one of the only bright spots to their experience was one particular scientist who treated the two like they were her own children. She was very warm and kind, playful yet gentle in the way she interacted with Halua and Emil. The two genuinely considered her to be their mother figure, and they called her Sensei. But while Halua desperately wanted to believe that she was different to the other adults around, she always erred on the cautious side in their situation. Ever since arriving, she's tried desperately to stay by Emil's side throughout it all. Emil at this age is still very much a child. He's ignorant to anything going on, he watches the clouds, bangs on the piano keys in their room, and draws the same picture over and over again each day, the entire time with a smile on his face, completely oblivious. It was Halua who was staying vigilant for the two of them, keeping track of the lessons they had each day, what they ate, what they drank, the adults they met, and what they spoke about. Over time, she came to only one conclusion. That was, don't trust the adults, Sensei being the only exception. But despite her erring on the side of caution, there wasn't actually much power she had to do about anything with their situation, and she wouldn't be able to. The day inevitably came when it was time to turn both her and Emil into weapons. On one unsuspecting day, she was put through the regular checkup and routine she usually does. However, afterwards, she was escorted to a different room. She was
Damn.
told that she had a serious illness and she needed to undergo surgery to save her life. But of course, Halua knew it was a lie. She didn't believe anything anyone was
It was
saying.
too late.
She was panicking and
I wonder how the
crying,
fuck she turned into that
worrying about
weird
the well-being of
body
her brother,
thing.
but there was nothing she could do. She was strapped down and held in place. Everything faded to black, and when she came to, she was taller. She felt weird. Her body wasn't the same. She looked like a skeleton. Halua had been successfully transformed into experimental weapon number 6.
And she has her red eyes too, by the way.
To fight back against the Legion hordes. She was strong, could utilize magic. Just by wishing it, she could destroy things in all kinds of
She ended up being more like a Watcher
She was
kind of
no
beast-looking
longer
thing.
a human, but rather a monster. But Halua was still in there. Her conscience was still perceptive to what she could see and how she was acting. She was still afraid, but as she overheard the scientists in the facility refer to her as a weapon, she came to the realization of what the facility was, how they were using the children, and how they were trying to create whatever it is she is now. More than afraid, Halua became angry, and the power she now possessed manifested. She broke out of her constraints, cut through the walls, and went on a rampage, killing all the adults that crossed her path in absolutely brutal ways, trying to find her brother and make sure he was safe.
Damn.
She even came across her sensei, which broke her heart even more, as she believed she was someone that she could trust. She cherished the time they spent together and how she made
And then
her
she just
feel
ate her.
loved. Halua saw what looked like her apologizing and saying she was sorry, but she couldn't hear a thing. With all of her strength, she mowed down what was in front of her as the white coat shot straight at the wall and stained it red. The facility was being reduced to rubble, but then Halua heard Emil's voice. You see, Halua wasn't the only one turned into a weapon. Emil was as well. But unlike Halua, who was meant to fight against the Legion, Emil was created to be a countermeasure against her. He was given the power to turn anything he looks at into stone. So, considering they lost control of Halua's power, she was deemed too dangerous and needed to be stopped. So Emil's power is used on her and she is petrified. Halua accepts her fate as she doesn't want to hurt anyone anymore, and she gives herself up to a cold sleep.
Yeah, you can really chop down you can really anything with red eyes. Clearly Yoko Taro is signifying, okay, this is the destruction, this is the destructive force in the story. These characters with red eyes, they're the ones that are being influenced by the flower, so to speak, maybe, you know. Yeah,
After this
they are
incident,
the destructive force in the stories.
Maso on humans were deemed
They are
too
the
dangerous and were massively scaled back. As for Emil, he was put in the
characters
care of what
are
remaining
beings that
scientists
want
were still left.
it all to end.
But while this experimental weaponization
Even in Automata,
failed
right?
from
Like the
Japan's
virus, the
own
logic
greed,
virus.
good news did
All
come
red
a
eyes.
few years later thanks to the Hamlin organization. This entire time, Crusade units have consistently been deployed, with each subsequent unit providing more capable soldiers. And
That's
in
a very
the year
it's a very
2030,
consistent theme.
Red Eye, the leader of the Legion, is slain in Jerusalem by the leader of the 13th Crusade unit. The commanding officer who dealt the final blow, however, is mortally wounded during the conflict and dies of his injuries shortly after. But with the defeat of Red Eye, the Legion is no longer able to coordinate their attacks. They don't disappear entirely just yet, however, they're not nearly as much of a threat as
Why
they
didn't you give me
once
two
were.
of them? I could have ate two.
Anyway, for now, that is the story with the Legion largely having come to a close. So we can now begin on
It was kind of a shorter story with the Legion
storyline that was happening at this time, which was how the world was dealing with white chlorination syndrome.
Project
So
Gestalt.
with no feasible cure even in the possible stages of development, alternative methods began being explored. You see, at its core, white chlorination syndrome isn't actually a disease. It's a pact made with one's soul. In truth, it is the soul which is in danger. So what happens when you remove the soul from the body and protect it? It turns out both sides wind up becoming safe. The soul is incapable of existing by itself, for a lack of a better term, so it can't get corrupted by the gods. So thus, there is no fear of succumbing to white chlorination syndrome. And the
Replicants?
body, well, there's nothing to form a pact, and so it's left alone. And thanks to the use of Maso, which effectively created magic, they were able to utilize this, but almost in the reverse manner. Where white chlorination syndrome stemmed from a pact with the giant and the watchers and the gods, scientists were utilizing Angelus's corpse
Nier Lore,
for a
yeah.
pact. By creating
I finished the game earlier today, General Spare, so we're going into the lore of the Nier Replicant, and we just got over, we just went over the Drakengard
When a pact
lore.
is initiated, the soul
It was really
is
good.
pulled from one's body and exchanged with another being. But since Angelus is dead, there's no soul to exchange. So scientists are effectively allowed to pull the soul out from people with no negative consequences. And in the year 2014, they successfully managed to pull it off. A soul is removed from a test subject's body, stored, and reunited. This whole operation was known as Project Gestalt.
Yes.
In case the term Gestalt is a tad confusing,
An organized whole that is perceived as more than the sum of its parts. That is such a good word for it. Nice. And yeah, I finished ending E today. So like I did 4 streams. And then today I did ending E. It was beautiful. I really liked it. And then because I had already played Automata, I was like, you know what? Let's watch a video, and this is a really good video, by the way, of the lore behind Nier. But I decided, why not? Let's watch the Drakengard stuff too, because the Drakengard stuff is interesting. Because I'm very much becoming a big fan of Yoko Taro's demented imagination. Because holy shit, that Drakengard stuff is fucking wild, man. Like god damn. And then he really tones it down with the Nier stuff.
it's basically another term when
I feel you, yeah,
talking
dude.
about
Holy
the soul.
crap.
So if you ever hear me use the term Gestalt,
Gestalt.
it's simply referring to the soul. Considering it was 2014 and fairly early into everything happening, public reception to this idea was less than enthusiastic. But as the years passed and
It's interesting how because it's a pact, like kind of from Drakengard, how it works, removing the soul, putting it into replicants kind of fixes the problem.
became more evident that a cure for white chlorination syndrome wasn't going to be found, Project Gestalt became the most promising endeavor and the one that was going to be greenlit. But removing the soul from a body wasn't without its problems, one of the most prominent being the body itself. The soul is ageless. It can survive as long as it needs to without aging a day, but the body is still flesh and bone and will rot over time. So the idea for replicants was created. Vessels based on the genetic information of a person.
Vessels.
It was
the
a shell that was
dude.
genetically designed to perfectly house whoever it was made for. And with these two processes in place, they could store all of humanity's souls for
remove and store souls
until the Legion and white chlorination syndrome was eradicated from the world entirely and return as if nothing ever happened. Considering that, theoretically, every human is no longer going to be around during this process, overseers are created to ensure Project Gestalt sees the success it's meant to fulfill. Several Devila and Popola units are then created.
So they already created.
These two are androids.
Best girls,
Replicants
androids.
are more akin to clones. They're not robots, and they still age.
Replicants are actually very much like the clone troopers of Star Wars in a way. Right?
Just
best girls, yeah. Okay, so matter of fact, let's change it up real quick.
without all the human parts, while the androids are forever ageless. It's Devila and Popola's job to oversee all replicants as they rid the world of the Legion and both gather and dispose of all of the harmful Maso causing white chlorination syndrome. They oversee their maintenance, and even if a replicant body were to die, it was their job to simply just create another one until the day came for that particular soul to be reunited. There are a few flaws that came from this, but I'll hold off for now and explain it a little down the line when it becomes more relevant. But you can imagine the amount of effort that it would take to individually return every single human soul back to their respective body. Or even more worrying, what would happen if
Trillions
something
of people
went wrong and the natural process was interrupted. For this, a failsafe needed to be implemented, a way to simultaneously force every single soul into their corresponding replicant on a large scale. For this, it required immense magical power, and so the Grimoire project was devised.
The Grimoire.
It's never quite delved into what exactly the Grimoires are, but in the simplest of terms, they are books that contain enormous amounts of magical energy. But there's a catch. A soul must be embedded into one to unlock its true power. So who else but the Hamlin organization stepped in to provide their own resources? The Hamlin organization by this point had defeated Red Eye and merged into Project Gestalt, and so helped out where they could in their child soldiers. All those children who were given Luciferase to fight against the Legion weren't immune to becoming infected. All Luciferase did was slow it down. All of them were infected and would inevitably succumb to white chlorination syndrome given time. Those who lived have proven themselves amongst the strong and capable. So the Hamlin organization rallied together 13 of the most promising previous soldiers, kidnapped them, threw them in a room, and provided each one of them a unique grimoire and ordered them to kill each other. Only 2 were allowed to live. This is the story we hear in And Then There Were None. We're never given the names of any of the characters, but for the sake of following the story, I'll call the main character in this Vice for what will become obvious reasons. You see, Vice was actually one of the child soldiers, part of the 13th Crusade unit that took down Red Eye. A few years have passed since then, and he's now in his late teens. He was always a capable soldier and one of the few lucky and skilled enough to survive. He woke up in
part
this
of the
room
faces.
with 12 past soldiers, all from different branches.
That's why they have faces, because they have an actual human soul in them, like
around the world. The only one he did recognize was a girl who was also part of the 13th Crusade, Rubrum, as we'll call her. She was not nearly as seasoned as Vice was to combat. She was a bit more aloof and borderline not ready to be deployed when she was. But she was a quick learner and physically formidable. Weiss during the war saved her life, but they were eventually split up. Them meeting here is the first time they've seen each other in over 3 years. As you might expect, there's much confusion between 13 strangers trapped in a dark room with a mysterious grimoire at their feet. But the confusion quickly escalates to panic when a man and woman begin arguing and things turn physical. The man grabbed for the girl, but the grimoire at her feet spawned a black hand and grabbed him and crushed him to death.
Oh, that one move
was then sucked into his grimoire. The color changed and a face appeared on the cover. While everyone initially sat in stunned silence, an uproar began as everyone panicked to understand what the book in their possession did. Various voices on an intercom interrupted, all speaking different languages so the respective participants could understand it, but all with the same message: use the books to kill each other. Only 2 can survive. With no further clarification or reasoning as to why this was happening, all everyone could do was fight for their own life. Initially, things broke out physically instead of via magic.
So the grimoire actually kind of like sucks the life force out of them, because it apparently absorbed that. I mean, the same thing with the heart, the shades, right? You kill the shades in Replicant, and it absorbs the shades and becomes more powerful. Their souls are in a... So the grimoires are actually harvesting souls. It collects souls. I mean, it was collecting the... I never really put that together, that you were collecting the shades as souls. Like, yeah, you were absorbing the shades for their power, but their souls are in them originally.
The girl was jumped and strangled to death by another participant. Her body was transferred into her grimoire, and while 2 other participants then tried to jump the man who just killed her, he fell to the ground and died in a very painful way before they had the chance. It's likely the observers have some kind of kill switch to rid anyone who simply tries to kill normally. What they want is magic, to understand it, to unlock it. They want these soldiers to unlock the potential of the grimoire so they can manipulate it. So everyone quickly went back to examining their books so they weren't killed. Vice and Rubrum attempted to work together and be the two survivors allowed to live. And while Rubrum was very thoughtful about the situation and the potential requirements needed to utilize it, her thought process is quickly interrupted when she sees a black lance hurtling towards an unsuspecting Vice. To repay his act of saving her life during the war, she pushes him out of the way and is skewered herself and dies. She too is sucked up into her grimoire. The color turns the shade of blood, and the face that appears looks nothing like her own. Vice cries out in distress, and amidst his cries, he activates his grimoire. Everything goes white. Countless letters begin appearing. When he came back to his senses, everyone in the room was dead. They were skewered amongst a horde of protruding spears from the floor. Vice did not do this.
There was 3 grimoires, no? There was Vice, Noir, and then there was that third one there.
Grimoire simply protected him from this attack. The one who did was Noir.
They ever
Vice and Noir
there
were
was
the
many?
two victors,
Okay.
so to speak. But
even in Replicant, it showed 3 in the Gestalt documents.
Everything was alive.
But they didn't really
were allowed
show
to
the
live,
third one?
but they weren't allowed to leave. Like everyone before them, Vice and Noir were absorbed into their respective grimoires.
Rubicon,
But unlike
what the
all
fuck?
of the others, they were sentient and still alive. These two became instrumental in Project Gestalt's plans.
So wait, hold on. So that this child soldier, Vice, despite the book absorbing other people's souls, when he got absorbed into the book, he made the book sentient, and so did that other girl, made Noir sentient.
Noir became
You fought Rubicon in Emil's mansion.
a new instrument to separate soul from body. The whole
Totally
thing could now
forgot
be
that. What
filtered
the
and
fuck?
done through Noir. And Vice was the tool to reunite the soul and body. While the books themselves have their own level of power to them, their main purpose was to act as an activation system. When Noir and Vice are activated at the same time, a massive amount of energy is created, which will send every soul back into their replicant body.
Oh, that's what they were for. Back that up. You need to hear that.
Amongst a horde of protruding spears, to speak, or so they thought. As per usual, everything was a lie, to speak, or amongst a horde of protruding spears from the floor. Vice did not do this. His grimoire simply protected him from this attack. The one who did was Noir. Vice and Noir were the two victors, so to speak, or so they thought. As per usual, everything was a lie. They were allowed to live, but they weren't allowed to leave. Like everyone before them, Vice and Noir were absorbed into their respective grimoires. But unlike all of the others, they were sentient and still alive. These two became instrumental in Project Gestalt's plans. Noir became a new instrument to separate soul from body. The whole
Noir was the one that separated the soul from body.
thing could now be filtered and done through Noir. And Vice was the tool to reunite the soul and body.
Oh, I see. So Noir separates, and Vice puts them back. Oh, okay.
While the books themselves have their own level of power to them, their main purpose was to act as an activation system. When Noir and Vice are activated at the same time, a massive amount of energy is created, which will send every soul back into their replicant body. As for all of the other grimoires,
Is Vice's involvement at the end of ending E how we get Nier back?
they appear to be meant to serve as a reserve system, extra energy to support these two.
I mean, it seemed
in case
like it
they need
anyway.
it. For the most part, Project Gestalt would continue as planned. Replicant bodies would be put in production and souls stored for a later date. But there's still one more story that we need to cover before things fully kick off. And this time, it does involve our three main characters. We've already been introduced to Emil, but we've yet to cover Nier, Yona, and Kaine. And in the story, the boy, the girl, and the weapon, their three paths would cross. I should probably start off by introducing our new characters. Nier and Yona are the simplest in terms of their background. They're brother and sister. In the original game, it was father and daughter, but the story has since been updated to have the two be siblings. Fortunately, this change does not drastically affect anything. Also, Nier is not his actual name. We officially never know what his true name is, but fans collectively agree and simply just call him Nier. But anyway, his and Yona's backstory is actually quite simple.
I actually thought his name was
Nier. The two are siblings. Not much, if anything, is known about their parents other than the fact that in modern day, they are no longer around. They likely fell victim to either the Legion or White Chlorination Syndrome, or
they're just
likely
survivors
died
of
via
the
natural
entire
causes.
events.
But regardless, Nier and Yona are alone, and being the older brother, Nier finds it his responsibility to look after his sickly sister. Yona's immune system isn't the strongest, and she's often in a generally weakened state. Not by White Chlorination Syndrome, but by normal sicknesses, it would seem. The two are very much civilians traveling from different help centers, trying their best to survive the chaos of the world brought upon by the Legion and White Chlorination Syndrome. For now, that's all there is to them. Kaine is a lot more unique in the sense that she's not a normal human. She was, like many, an experiment. She was born from the DNA of her grandparents, which technically makes them her parents, but I'll get to that soon, and Legion DNA. She was a designer baby, genetically altered.
A designer baby. They implemented Legion DNA into her. And human. So she was always going to be interesting. But then, is that why she, I don't know.
As just another experiment. But this time around, she wasn't an experiment or made this way because of the government or army. It was due to her grandmother, Kali. Being her grandmother was simply just a cover story, likely due to her age. The reason she has so much pull to have a designer baby is because she's considered a war hero, and not just a simple one at that. Kali was given the credit for killing Red Eye. She was the vice captain of the 13th Crusade, the one that took him down. It was the captain of that unit who killed Red Eye. However, he died following that clash. For whatever reason, Kali was given the recognition as the hero who killed him. Whether that was her doing or the government so they can have an alive figurehead to keep morale up is unknown. But because she's recognized as the hero who stopped the Legion, she was rewarded with hefty amounts of money. She then used that money to invest into scientific military research and became incredibly rich. Since then, she married her husband, whom she met during her service, and has spent her years trying to live a relatively normal life. Her time in the war greatly traumatized her, as did the general heartache of seeing your neighbors, family, and lovers all get turned into Legion. She developed a very brash personality because of it. She's vulgar, fierce, and often stubborn. Her language has next to no filter, and she'll often speak before ever considering her words. But despite this, deep down, she still did have a kind and caring heart, even though it was often hard for that to come across. Which is why when Kaine was born, she didn't treat her as though she were an experiment. She and her husband cared for her like she was a daughter, so much so that Kaine didn't even know there was anything special about her, and they never told her. Kaine lived a perfectly normal, albeit strict, life.
Well, I guess because Kaine was experimented on, she was kind of like a mutant.
Thanks to her grandparents. As for the reason Kali would want a child with Legion genes, it's never explicitly said, but it's implied that she wanted her child to be strong enough to defend them against any potential threat in the future. It makes sense because her safety is always in consideration, as in conjunction with having a warrior daughter, she pays for her own private military to guard her at all times. But as for Kaine, she's actually quite different personality-wise to the girl we get in-game. In fact, Kali is a lot more reminiscent of her attitude. Kaine here is a lot more soft-spoken, as she was raised to be fairly obedient by her grandmother. Her grandfather felt a bit guilty about this and so bought her a white dog. Kaine was a formal maiden of high society, so she wasn't very vulgar. Outside of the occasional arguments with her grandmother, she lived a peaceful life she was happy with, though she could always sense something eerie in the back of her mind. Whatever that Legion part within her was, she instinctively felt it. And with our new cast introduced, I can finally talk about the events from the boy, the girl, and the weapon. The event that kicks everything off is an unexpected Legion attack. By this point, with Red Eye dead, the Legion weren't nearly as coordinated or dangerous, so they were relegated to be dealt with by smaller and local forces. Where this story branches is the Legion attack, however, they're accompanied by a Red Eye. This story treats the term Red Eye more so as a classification of Legion, as if it's the most dangerous form one.
Let me get my charger for my mic. The drama CD. The drama CD. Hold up. Man. Yo, this shit goes deep, man. I didn't realize I was gonna watch this long. It's so interesting though. You just the further you dive into it, you're just like, what the hell? The madman Yoko Taro really knows how to connect many different ideas together, though, I tell you what.
Can reach. The Red Eye leader is definitely dead. This Red Eye is just a very dangerous and powerful Legion.
How long are you gonna watch it? Probably not that much longer, honestly.
But for this story, I will be...
I don't think I'm able to finish this today. If anything, I might do like a separate shorter stream and finish the rest of this, because it's very incredibly interesting. I had decided already for my next game, I'm gonna do Amori. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Amori, but it's been on my backlog for a long time, and I really want to get that one out of the way. I heard good things about that. I'd be happy to watch it. Yeah, I'll announce when I'll do it. I have heard of it, yeah. I heard decent, good things about it. So I'll do that one, that game. Yeah, and then maybe some Detroit Become Human after. And then after that, probably Hollow Knight. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Things always come up. I don't. For all you know, I might just suddenly just give into the Tears of the Kingdom hype and just do that. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see how that goes.
Using the
let's do 30 more minutes.
When an attack occurs in Shinjuku,
that way I can like kind of watch half of it, and then we'll do like a short stream at some point and watch the rest of this.
Panic.
Yeah.
Breaks out amongst the public. Amidst them are Nier and Yona. During the chaos of all the civilians running around, the two are separated, and Yona winds up making her way to a nearby mansion, which, as you could guess, belongs to Kaine's family. Kaine is kind enough to console the distressed Yona, calming her down and bringing her inside to ease the nerves of the chaos.
So the human Kaine had actually met the human Yona.
Nier eventually finds his way there as a passerby on the street saw someone of her description and pointed him in that direction. He thanks Kaine for being so kind and keeping her safe. But while...
Didn't they mention that in the story?
While all of this is going on, there's still what's happening with the Legion and Emil. Emil, ever since the incident with his sister, has been in the care of the few remaining scientists that remained after the project was downsized. Fortunately, it seems these scientists were a lot more caring for Emil than how he was treated during his time before. They call him Emil. They don't treat him as though he's a weapon. Generally, it seems to have been a better environment overall. But that only lasted for so long, as a new character named Yura, or as he would later be more popularly known as Tyran, decided to kidnap him. He was the section chief of the Countermeasure Against Special Biological Organisms Department, as well as the commander of the Shinjuku Area Defense Team. He's a very bloodthirsty and ruthless individual.
Tyran
he has
actually
no problem
had
using force or
involvement in
killing
this.
people to get what he wants. He has a high position because he is very intelligent and has an apt way of resolving problems. But he's infamous for his violence. He raids the facility holding Emil and takes him hostage to use as a weapon to fight against the Legion and Red Eye. Emil, not wanting any harm to come to any of the scientists, goes with him. But where does Yura fit into the rest of this story? Well, it turns out he's in charge of the military group that Kali hires to protect her and her family. She's been personally funding most of his endeavors, which has allowed him to accrue the weapons and resources he has. And because of this, when the Legion attack breaks out, Kali calls him to come and defend her, which he's paid to do. And so, Yura, his soldiers, and Emil all make their way to Kali's mansion.
So the Tyran was initially connected to the human kinda.
When they arrive, they immediately deploy all sorts of weapons, most notably a P-22 unit, an early version of what we later see as the P-33. It shoots the Red Eye with a laser, severing its arm, but
Oh, that's
much to
sick.
everyone's shock, it grows more arms out of its skin. Legion come crawling out from it as well. The Red Eye is much more powerful and dangerous than anyone could have predicted. The damages
Gestalt.
extend onto the mansion in which Emil, Yona, Kaine, and her grandparents all reside. Red Eye makes his way inside while the Legion attack Yura and his forces. Kaine's grandfather is stabbed, saving Kali, and when he tries to pass on some advice to Kaine about how things are only going to get worse, he is crushed to death. Meanwhile, as the Red Eye runs rampant within the mansion,
Fuck.
Yura grabs Emil from the truck to deal with all of the new Legion numbers. He forces Emil to use his powers and turns everyone to stone, including his own men. Yura shows no sympathy for his willingness to sacrifice the lives of all in front of him just to save his own. Emil begs for him to stop as he doesn't like what he's being forced to do. So Yura injects him with some kind of drug which makes Emil lose control of his powers. Having just lost control of his greatest weapon and Red Eye still causing mayhem, he sees no victory in this current situation and so abandons the scene and runs away. As for Kaine, unfortunately the death of her grandfather wouldn't be the only tragedy that struck. Kali is there contemplating the death of her husband. She feels a lot of regret never disclosing to their daughter the truth about what she was. And before she has the chance to tell her, she too is grabbed by Red Eye and swallowed whole. Kaine witnesses this, and the devastation she feels swells up within her. The
Goddamn.
sadness, the anger, the confusion, the rage, every single emotion is swirling around her head. She deep down feels the dark power within her. She screams in pain and
Yeah, she
loses
powers it with her
control,
negative emotion,
entering
right?
this rampant state where she can utilize her hidden power. She rips Red Eye's stomach open with her bare hands, to which Kali emerges from still alive. Kaine then rips Red Eye to shreds and kills it.
Damn.
The Legion and Red Eye are no longer a problem. It's now Emil and Kaine who are both berserking. Nier, for some reason, feels obligated to stop them. He doesn't physically do anything, but he shouts at them to stop. Even when the soldiers and
The original
everyone
Shadow
around
Lord.
them believe them to be monsters, Nier continues believing in them as humans, and so begs for them to stop fighting, which they do. Emil and Kaine return to their senses. By this point, it can be assumed that some multiple timeline bleeding occurred, which led to this innate connection he felt to them in the first place. But all that mattered now is that they stopped. Emil was sedated and taken back
Or
to
the
the
girl weapon,
facility,
yeah.
while Kaine cries with her grandmother because she's scared. The story ends there. The characters just go on their separate ways. But it wouldn't be the last time fate brought these three
Yeah,
together.
then their replicant versions
With that
and the
story
real
out of the way,
Emil
it's
show
time
up
to
later.
return back to Project Gestalt. I mentioned earlier that the project had a few flaws when it came to separating soul from body. One of the more minor ones was that the vessels the souls were placed in for the indefinite amount of time were actually weak to sunlight, hence why they would later be nicknamed shades. Yes, if you're familiar with the game, every single shade is a human soul waiting to be reunited with its
Yeah.
body. But they aren't up and active. They're basically in storage, sleeping or unconscious. Their weakness to sunlight is but a minor nuisance.
It's interesting because they're kept into storage, but they're like a physical manifestation of the human soul.
What was a real problem was the risk of relapsing. Relapsing
yeah.
is what happens when the soul loses its sentience. As a result, they become hostile and aggressive, trying to kill. Once a Gestalt relapses, the person they once were is gone, and they basically cease to exist as they're just a mindless, bodiless monster. Initially, every single Gestalt that was created would inevitably relapse.
I really love this idea in the game. The soul by itself, without having a body to call its own, loses its sense of self entirely because it wouldn't make sense to it, I guess.
Whether it was immediately or slowly over time, every single person who was turned into a Gestalt was slowly losing their sentience. So of course, if left unattended, the plan was a failure. Everyone was still going to die eventually. So analysis revealed that in order to stabilize a Gestalt's self-awareness, they needed a stable, solid source of purified Maso from a person who maintained his being after being transformed. Basically, a perfect genetic match. So the World Purification Commission, in conjunction with the Hamlin organization, figured the best way of producing someone like this was via one of the sealed grimoires. Grimoire Noir is selected for this task, and many clone duplicates are created and handed out. The government disguises themselves as various relief centers in poverty-stricken areas and refugee camps and hand out copies of Grimoire Noir in hopes of finding a Gestalt attuned to the book's power. It wasn't a very pretty or clean
because Noir is the one that separates them, so someone would try to access it.
Experiment. By sheer numbers, every single person who touched the grimoire and wasn't the one perfect match they were looking for was immediately turned into a relapsed Gestalt. It could have been hundreds or even thousands of people who fell victim to this ploy. And this is where Nier and Yona re-enter the story. It's been about 3 years since the events.
That's so good, actually. Interesting.
Yona is still sick, and so in hopes to find medicine that can better her condition, the two enter one of these relief centers. But early on into their arrival, the two sense that something isn't right, and so make haste to try and quickly escape. But they witness the others who were there in need be handed these grimoires and be transformed into relapsed Gestalts. He witnessed his community and those others.
That's why he's like, don't touch it, no matter what.
Used as nothing
even though it
more
gives
than
them
lab
powers,
rats.
magic powers.
Fortunately, he and Yona were able to escape and flee to an abandoned supermarket.
Exactly,
Clearly still exhausted and worn out from all that they've been through, they try to recompose themselves here. Nier obviously goes on to tell his sister never to touch the grimoire.
Yeah, because he just saw other people do it.
The two were followed by those relapsed Gestalts. Nier is ambushed by them, and knowing that he's
from where they got the grimoire, but he knows bad things are happening.
His sister as he is now, he turns to the grimoire in hopes for more power. Upon touching it, not only does he not relapse, but he is the perfect genetic signature that the government's been looking for. With his newfound strength, he is able to unleash a barrage of magic attacks and utilize its full power to wipe out all the relapsed Gestalts.
And his genetic code is used for his replicant, and the replicant ends up being being able to access the powers of the grimoire and all that.
But when he returns to Yona, it turns out she also touched the book because she wanted to help her brother. But since she's not a match for the book, she began to relapse. Shortly after, she fell into a coma. It didn't take long before the government found Nier and brought him in. The only reason Nier was playing along was because finding a cure for his sister was his #1 priority. Yona was placed into a cryogenic sleep, halting her gestaltization process. For the next 5 years, Nier allowed any experiment to be done on him in hopes of finding this cure. Grimoire Noir had also been programmed to obey Nier. He was a very loyal and determined subject. In the CD drama, The Promise of 1,000 Years is where we hear these events. Nier's very worried for his sister, especially after all this time has passed and still no cure has been found. Unfortunately for him, a cure wouldn't be found. Science had reached the limits of its research for any cure, and so were incapable of helping Yona's condition. But a compromise was struck. They told Nier that at the end of the cycle, when all of the Maso had been rid from the world and humanity could return to their replicant bodies,
that's why Devil and Popola said they just needed more time to wait until the next cycle.
By that time, they would have the means to cure Yona. They estimated that it would take 1,000 years for Project Gestalt to be complete. So all anyone had was their word. But what could Nier do? If he says no, then Yona was just going to die anyway. If he agrees to it, then at the very least, he knows scientists will try to help him because he's effectively preserving humanity. It was on this promise alone that Nier agreed to become the original Gestalt
just to save
that
his
they
sister,
needed. But he swore that if they failed to keep their word, he would rebel. Nier's soul was then separated from his body, and this new entity that he became known as was the Shadow Lord. It's important to note that every sentient shade is linked to the Shadow Lord. He's the one keeping them from relapsing. Their lives all depend on him. As such, they worship him as though he were a god. But at the same time, if he died, so would all of them. And with that, Project Gestalt was in full effect. Eventually, every human underwent the Gestalt process and had their soul transferred into a shade. It was now up to Devila and Popola to ensure the will of humanity.
So they all went into shades because they figured the Shadow Lord can keep them sentient long enough for the project to finish. It was all left on the Shadow Lord. That's crazy.
Humanity was fulfilled. To make their job a bit easier, replicants are initially given a minimal amount of sentience to follow basic commands. With this, they are tasked with exterminating the Legion still roaming the Earth and gathering all of the Maso particles so they can send it back to where it came. But of course, nothing is ever so simple and things can't just work. About 700 years into this process, the replicants began to gain sentience. They came into their own being, formulated their own thoughts, emotions, experiences, and acted independently. By the year 3000 and the turn of the new millennium, most replicants had acquired sentience. It's important to note that the replicants' personalities are unique to them. Their entire identity and whatnot are formed based on the stimuli of what's around them, having very little, if anything, in common to their original soul. As such, civilizations and cultures rapidly begin developing. Despite this, Devila and Popola are still able to influence their actions, and Project Gestalt is still moving forward. By the year 3276, a familiar foe would rear its ugly head. A young replicant hoping to bring his dead lover back to life hears the legend of a forbidden land where one's greatest desire can be fulfilled: Jerusalem, the same place where
the Red Eye was
killed. The replicant brings his lover's corpse here and wishes for her resurrection. Much to his surprise, she wakes up, eyes fiery red. Red Eye has been resurrected. She kills her lover and goes on to assemble what few members of the Legion still remain. 11 years later, Red Eye and the last remnants of the Legion begin a march of terror against the replicants. But an android, along with 4 replicants, banded together and challenged Red Eye. After a massive battle, the commander is slain, as are the last of the Legion. And with that,
that's kind of a cool. That sounds like a pretty cool ass story. Finally, the androids and replicants are put into play against the Legion.
Androids send the last of the corrupt Maso back to the parallel world. Both the Legion and White Chlorination Syndrome have been eradicated, and the purification of the world is complete. The following year, the Gestalts begin to awaken as the next phase of the project commences. This is where the Shades come in. The souls are ready to re-emerge with their bodies, and so make various attempts to try. But the newly self-aware replicants see these monsters as body snatchers, and so attack them on sight to defend themselves. Battles between replicants and Gestalts continue for the foreseeable future. It's the replicants who dub the Gestalts shades due to their weakness to light. Devila and Popola try quite a bit to influence replicants into accepting the merger with their soul, however, it's very rare. After about 12 years of trying things the peaceful way, they come to the conclusion that it's not going to work, and so look towards the Revival Ceremony, or the Grimoire Project, to forcefully reintegrate everyone. As for Nier, or
yeah, because
Shadow
replicants
Lord,
became
he's
too
been
sentient.
consistently
They weren't.
providing Maso to the Gestalt system for over 1,200 years. He's been awake this entire time. He was initially told it would only take 1,000, and yet here he is, and the project still hasn't been completed. He starts losing trust in the system and fears Yona will never be revived at this rate if he does not act himself.
Nier and Yona replicant. The replicant one.
And this is where we can finally start following our new replicant cast.
Oh,
We're
that's
not at the
cool.
beginning of the game just yet, but we can at the very least start talking about the life of our new replicant Nier. So, considering all of the replicants formed their personalities based on their surroundings, this Nier has a lot in common with the original, specifically his connection and care for his sister Yona. The two stories begin fairly early into the beginning of their replicant lifespans. Nier's entire existence is solely dedicated to providing for his sister, considering their parents are no longer with them. The two do have very vivid memories of their parents, however. Apparently, their father worked in a faraway city and was rarely at home, but sometime after Yona's birth, he died outside, leaving Nier hardly remembering much about him. As for their mother, she lived with them, keeping the family up and running, largely tending to the garden they had outside. However, she wound up getting afflicted by the Black Scrawl, something I have yet to mention up till this moment. To the replicants, it is an incurable disease in which black runes appear on the skin, which is guaranteed to result in death. Anyone can be afflicted. It's unlike any disease or sickness to ever appear. Young, old, healthy, or frail, it comes unexpectedly and will always take the victim. But what the replicants don't know is that the Black Scrawl is actually a reflection of what's happening to their gestalt, to their real soul. When the corresponding soul begins relapsing, losing their conscience, or dies, the replicant gets the Black Scrawl as an indicator that they are going to die forever. If the soul dies, the replicant system isn't able to retrieve the data from it to create the replicant. Thus, they will cease to exist. As I mentioned earlier, replicants can be created as many times as they need so long as there's a soul to spawn it from. In fact, it's necessary. The replicants age like any human would. They have a life cycle that's fairly natural. And considering Project Gestalt had been in place for over 1,000 years, the replicants have gone through many lives. They grow up, they grow old, and die. Once the replicant dies, Devila and Popola create a new one from whenever their soul originated. They memory wipe them and reintroduce them into the community. In their mother's case,
they always go back to the baseline
relapsed
age of the original
mother
human soul
along with it. She died suddenly in front of a 10-year-old Nier. He went to Popola for answers, hoping she could explain. However, she said nothing. Of course, she knew exactly what happened, but could only share her condolences with the now orphaned boy. In fact, it would be because of Devila and Popola that the term Black Scrawl even came to be. The two are constantly having to make up history about the world and what things are to quell the curiosity of the people. But fortunately, due to their genuine kindness and caring disposition, they were very much trusted by the people. Her and Devila, along with many of the other villagers who knew Nier's family, prepared a funeral and laid her to rest.
It would make sense why Popola is based in a library, because she had to basically keep creating stories and expanding the universe so replicants can actually believe their history, like that history. She was creating history for them to create a world they can believe in order to keep the project going.
Yona was much too young.
Basically, essentially creating their reality.
Being a little under 2 years.
Oh, the replicants can't read the works in the library either, really?
But this is where Nier began caring for her. As a replicant,
Because it
Yona
was like
is
different
still a
writing. It was like
sickly young
old
child,
writing, right?
but what she suffers from is different from her original human counterpart. Yona here develops the Black Scrawl
That was an
just
early
like
comment.
their mother. She isn't born with it, but after their parents' death, that is when it appeared on her body. But what
Damn.
makes her unique is that Yona is always going to be afflicted with the Black Scrawl, and that's because her soul is being kept in cryostasis. When she touched Grimoire Noir, her soul began to relapse and the doctors froze her, leaving her permanently in
He was
that
always gonna
state.
get the scroll.
So
yeah.
while she's not technically dying, her replicant will always have the Black Scrawl. It was a rough job for Nier, going from a child into his teen years, having to be the sole person responsible for taking care of his sister. And in the story, The Red and the Black, we hear the lengths he's willing to go for her well-being. As stated,
Guess that
Yona
limbo,
winds up
yeah.
developing the Black Scrawl, something that makes him very worried. Symptoms of the disease are not unlike the flu in fevers and coughs, however, it also comes with pain. The patient's body is constantly hurting, and it persists, only escalating as the scrawl worsens until they inevitably die. Yona, even as young as she is already constantly in pain, and while no cure exists, Popola informs Nier of a medicine that he can give her that can, at the very least, lessen the burden on her body. The problem is, the ingredients needed don't grow locally, so the medicine was very expensive. Fortunately, in the beginning, their parents had stashed away some funds, so he was able to afford getting her some medicine and seeing just how effective it was. And so while he couldn't cure it, the least he could do was constantly supply her with the medicine she needs, and to do that, he needs money. Nier was always asking villagers if there were any jobs he could do for payment. Occasionally, people
Just poor.
gave him small little errands to run. It's reflected in-game as well. It's why so many side missions are simple, mundane tasks that the person giving the job can likely do themselves, like
course.
delivering a letter or a package or just collecting things. They want to give Nier something to do for some spare coin. It became normal for villagers to do this, but not so consistent that it was any sort of comfortable living for anyone involved. The village is already relatively small and poor, so the jobs were sparse, and even if people wanted to help, they weren't exactly in a position to help. Because of this, he was eventually told of another job he could take up out of the village and in the town of Seafront. It's a nearby port town that overlooks the ocean. He'd never been there before, but if it was to earn some extra cash, then he might as well.
The
The
story
job
summary
was
part one,
relatively
kinda
easy,
story,
just to deliver
backstory,
a letter to
replicant.
someone in the city.
All right, so I think from here, I'll call it here. I'll do a short stream at some point and go over the rest of this lore video because it's really good.